Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Deadliest Warrior podcast. I'm your host, Matt Davis, joined by my fellow hosts,
Craig Taylor
and
Lucas.
And we have a special guest star waiting in the wings for you tonight, Mia Khalifa. Oh, wait, my bad.
She canceled.
It's our international Canadian correspondent, Walsh.
Hola.
Returning for the third time, brother. You're a staple.
Sir. Happy to be back.
That's some delicious sweet water right there, boys. Today, we will be covering Ivan the Terrible, Russia's sadistic 16th century Tsar, whose murderous mounted death squads built Europe's largest empire of its time, versus Hernan Cortez, the brutal Spanish explorer whose conquistadors conquered the largest empire in North America of the 16th century. Guys, the first frame of this episode is Hernan Cortez screaming, "Fuego!"
Probably with that accent too.
Right. I'd love to get you guys initial thoughts, not just about your rewatch, but do you have any memories of this episode from back in the day?
I have more memories of Hernan Cortez in the Deadliest Warrior game than anything else. I don't remember this episode at all.
Gotcha. Lucas?
Yeah, I think this is kind of the same thing we talked about. I don't even know what week we're recording anymore. One of the other weeks where there's like no big memorable weapon from this episode, I feel like, that like stands out. So I didn't have very much of a memory of it. It's kind of a fresh rewatch. It's probably the first time I've seen it since it actually premiered, like most of season 3. So yeah, went into it. I didn't even remember who won until the end. And it's frustrated. I'm representing Ivan the not so terrible today.
The not so terribly good bad day or whatever. Yeah, I envy you of that. As I told you guys before, I have a brain illness that never lets me forget who won on Deadliest Warrior. However, I had only seen this episode once when it like aired, so it was like watching a new episode in a lot of ways for me. And even though I knew who won, I will say, I'm sure it'll be discussed a lot throughout this episode, before the reenactment played, I was like, how does this guy win? I was like, it seems like it's leaning one way, but you know.
I had the moment where I was halfway through my watch and, you know, Ivan comes out strong. He comes out punching like Ivan Drago, pretty much. And so I'm like, okay, there's no way this dude's going to lose. And I like Google one of the weapons for some part of my research and like scroll down a little bit and I see like he lost to Cortez. I was like, bullshit.
Now, this is going to be difficult for me, Lucas, because I'm hosting today and you have the Thirst Trap Nami shirt on.
This isn't the worst one, though. I don't remember if I ever wore the other one on the podcast.
I think you have.
Yeah, this is the not. This is the more.
This is only.
This is the PG-13 one.
This is only side view, is what I'll call it. You know, stay within guidelines.
If you can't see it on the camera, just Google Nami wanted poster. It's like her first one.
Nice. Walsh.
Actually, it's not her first one.
You being a recurring guest, you got dibs on what episode you wanted to show up.
She did have one with the other pirates.
What made you choose Hernan Cortez?
Yeah.
What memories do you have of this episode?
Honestly, the only reason I really chose this was because I had done Aztec Jaguar.
Yes.
And I kind of just wanted to get the other side of it, I guess. But I don't really remember much from this episode at all. And to be honest, it was kind of like a milquetoast episode. The experts were kind of just whatever. The weapons were kind of just whatever. And it kind of just played out. I don't know. I mean, they looked cool, but like the Bardiche is kind of cool, I guess. But
yeah, Fuego.
Yeah, it's really. It could be interesting because some of the weapons are sort of cool. You know, you get the Arquebus, I feel like, is a really important weapon to be on the show. And I think the halberd that Hernan gets is pretty cool. And plus, Ivan is somebody, at least in the U.S., not a lot of people know about, at least maybe me. And his weapons are pretty unique. So in terms of like categories, the weapons, I think, at least are there on this episode.
Mm-hmm. I would have to agree more with you, Craig. I actually did like the experts, but I get where Walsh is coming from in that they don't say much. I just kind of I like the way Jason is. I like the way Vlad is giving off.
We'll get to it at the sword test, but Jason, he's a bit of a character, I guess. But yeah, like, they didn't really have any grand comments to make or like catchphrases or anything like that.
Shubba-da-doo!
Yeah, I kind of thought like these guys are fine.
Shaka would like that.
The weapons, like we've seen a couple like them before, but like I thought they were pretty unique, especially for the firearms section. I really liked, and and I will say two credit to this episode. I feel like with season 3, maybe a difference just relating to this podcast. And I don't know if anybody watching feels this way, but seasons 1 and 2, I feel like there was a lot more infighting between the Xenu group chat and the crowd on this podcast outside of it as to who won particular episodes. Like, I have felt like season 3, we have almost been like in complete like agreement across everything. Like whether we agree someone got screwed or whether we agree someone
Or don't care.
Like I feel like there was a little bit with the George Washington episode, but I can't think of another one we've recorded so far where we've been like, one of us has been very upset. And I must say the Xenu group chat, because of this episode, was buzzing with memes this week. Pretty good. Chad versus Virgin memes. Craig posted, like a comic strip of like a mouth breathing troglodyte guy and was like, your average Ivan lover.
It was Brennan knows who it was. That image came to my mind. He's from Berserk. He's like the little torturer guy. He has like a cleft lip and he's like all fucking weird.
You should throw him up on screen.
Yeah, I will. And I didn't find him, Brendan. I Googled Berserk torture gimp. It was the first result.
You were like average Ivan the terrible enjoyer.
Yeah, it's the Berserk torture gimp.
So thought that was pretty great.
Season 3 is making me cynical towards the show again.
A little bit, yeah. But overall, I do want to just kind of set the record with posy vibes. I got posy vibes from this episode. I wasn't too upset. I thought it was interesting. And
Fuego.
I thought it was Fuego. And who could have won? I mean,
does it kind of remind you of a season 1 episode?
Which one are you thinking about in particular?
No, just like vibes. Like it's kind of like back to basics.
It is sort of like a Forget Me Not, like season 1 episode, kind of like a Shaolin Bowery episode where it just
that was my other one.
Yeah. It comes and it goes, and you're definitely like,
okay.
You're definitely like, this isn't the worst one I've seen. I don't hate it. And you're like, but it's, it didn't give me a raging hard on.
Yeah.
Maybe some folks feel differently at home. I actually was picking up the vibes from a lot of our fans that they were looking forward to this episode. Actually,
yeah.
I was picking up some heavy Hernan versus Ivan vibes.
He's a popular character just in pop culture in general.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to say for the record too, I'm not sure what this is probably coming out mid to later in our season, but I like to go on the record and say at least I was wrong about season 3. I heavily misremembered season 3 and I thought it was like really boring. And there's obviously stuff that I don't agree with, and I'm sure we'll come to terms with that at the end of the season, but a lot more entertaining than I gave it credit for.
Half the fun is getting fired up over stupid shit.
Yeah. I think, I don't want to spend too much time on it because we will do a season 3 wrap up. We'll do a show autopsy as a whole, I'm sure.
I heard you're going to do a freestyle on that.
Right, yeah. Little known fact, also dope on the mic. But I will say there are some things about season 3 where I think this is the best season of Deadliest Warrior, and then there is moments where I'm just like, God, this is the worst.
Are those moments with Robert Daly on the screen?
You know what? That's not a coincidence.
And Robert Daly, just as a little teaser, one of the better aftermaths of the series. He is in full form.
Yeah, I think I wrote on here, we get perhaps our most mind-boggling aftermath of the entire show.
I don't watch the aftermath, so I'm excited to hear what.
It is. There is some shit.
I caught part of it this time.
Yeah, there is some shit spoketh on this.
And a lot of implications. If you take his word as true, which you should not, neither should have Spike TV, you will realize that, holy shit, this is the most advanced sim mankind has ever seen.
Yep. All right, well, I'll start off by giving the stats. We have Ivan the Terrible. He's built like a, brick shit house.
Hey.
Circa 1560 AD. It's a good thing. It means he's big and sturdy. Age 30, height 6 foot, and weight about 180 pounds. And then we have Mr. Hernan Cortez, dated 1521 AD, so about 40 years before, 39 years before or so. Age 36, height 5'4", weight 135. So there's a significant difference in body type in this.
You know what's weird to me? They choose to not say Reign of Terror.
Right. For
Not passing judgment.
even though his name's Ivan the Terrible. That's because he did good.
Oh, I'm talking about Cortez too.
It's like how whenever you're like do good, sometimes they say like, "Oh, you're bad." Like Michael Jackson was bad, except he was bad.
Yeah.
So
they try
he
to make Ivan to be like this big guy, but like if you're 6 foot 185, like you're really not that big. Like you're pretty lanky. Like
Right.
I mean, I don't know. Lucas is pretty. I mean, all you guys are pretty tall for the most part. Like whenever I've been under 200 pounds, I feel pretty small.
Yeah, I've had the privilege from a young age to have to sit next to Lucas everywhere, and so I always look like a short asshole.
Well, what's funny about me, I was built like a twig for the longest time because my metabolism was too high, and I finally like filled out to my frame a little bit.
Yeah.
Took
what
like
do
26,
you
27
weigh?
years. Right now, I think I'm like 185, maybe.
Hey,
180.
so
What, you're
Ivan-
like 6'3"?
Yeah.
Yeah. Ladies, he's not single. So
One lady watching.
Yeah, no.
Mom.
Oh, Matt's mom.
So one amazing, I have a couple notes about the intro here. You guys can chime in if you have anything to add, but they're going through like the three of them, Mac, Jeff, and Dorian at the table, and Mac and Jeff start talking about all the like history, mental health, the weapons. We're going to disprove some myths about flintlocks here. And then it gets to Dorian, and Dorian is giving some major guy who's helping give a group presentation but did no work on any of the slides energy. He goes, and I quoted this exact quote, "You've got crazy guys. It's going to be off the charts when it comes to who's going to kill who."
I heard that too. Lucas was talking at his
So
Then he goes to the next note card.
very much like, I have nothing to say, but I'm happy to get some points on this project.
Guys are crazy.
This is wild.
And that is
whoever
doesn't like
kills who, this is gonna be nuts.
it does seem like the theme of this episode, to Dorian's point, is the bad guys.
Yes.
Unlike Saddam Hussein, I guess, but you know what I mean. Like the bad warriors are actually warriors, so which I think is like the through line or the thesis.
So during the intro, we also get first shot, one of many this episode, of Robert Daly's computer. At least for this episode. Now on the Ivan the Terrible slide, I had to pause it because they're always putting stuff like that, and I see funny things here and there, but I rarely make note of it. I had to pause it because I see on the Ivan Terrible slide, bottom of the screen, you can see he has 3 unique X factors listed. Paranoia is the first one. You have Goulet Gorod. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but it is. I looked it up. It's a Russian fortification that was used between the 16th and 17th centuries when this takes place.
So it's a fortification.
That's an X factor.
So like, it's straight up like a stat they would give you in Civ, like a bonus if you're playing as
like a
Russia.
defensive bonus.
Yeah, like a worker can build the Goulet Garad or whatever. And then, of course, last but not least, syphilis. So syphilis. The only ones for Hernan, I figured I'd just check it out. Not as funny. So he's got Fearmonger, Risk Taker, and then Master of Charm and Diversion, which I thought was pretty funny.
That one I would kind of agree with. But I would also say like the Ivan ones, other than that weird one, kind of fit Hernan as well. I mean, we could get into it a little bit more later, but he was a bit paranoid.
Yeah.
And
Did he have syphilis?
He did have syphilis at one point. I can tell you. I'll tell you.
Don't we all?
Well,
No.
One point.
no comments. So speaking of syphilis, there's a lot about mental health in this episode, to the degree which it decides the winner ultimately. And before we talk about the historical facts, I just want to get you guys' thoughts, because I always like putting these questions out there. I know there's probably not a sim. They probably make up the results. Like, we're pretty sure about all that.
I could guarantee it.
How would that work? How would that work in a situation where it's 5-on-5? Like, how would something like paranoia or syphilis come into play?
Well, you got a little bit of time before the battle starts. Maybe the men get a little bored together, and the syphilis gets
Spread.
I don't know.
I think the only way that paranoia could work, my first thing that comes to mind is XCOM. If you ever played XCOM 1 or 2, how your guys could get lose morale and they start shooting each other. That is a little bit more extreme. Plus, is his paranoia affecting his men?
Yeah.
So that doesn't entirely work. But you would have to have personalities built out. It's not just weapon versus weapon in the sim. There's this AI that's making decision making, and it's making worse decision making based on paranoia.
Yeah, and I would agree with the worst decision making, because that's sort of the way they put it, I think, in this episode, is that all this stuff like paranoia and syphilis affects your brain. It is funny to say, syphilis, but I think ultimately all of this is docking their psychological health X factor. I know it's not real, but if you were doing a real sim like this, and that psychological health being so bad is leading to them making poor tactical strategy decisions. I guess I wanted to get across, you can see how it would work in a sim, but based on anything we're told about this sim, I asked this again and again. We've been asking it since season 1. How the hell does strategy work in this sim?
He's sitting around that fire too, and he goes, "Boys, we should build a Russian fortification." And they're like, "Ivan, you're just being paranoid, bro."
Because to me, the sim seems like it would plant. He's been smoking too much of that good Ivan Kush, that Mercury Kush. He's like, "Bro, did you hear that? Anybody got some Doritos?" So, because I try to think about strategy in this, and it's isn't the sim basically when you're playing a real-time strategy game and you hit the auto-complete instead of doing the actual fight? What strategy is being implemented exactly? It seems like something that you would really need a human player for, but I guess, if you play on hard difficulty on those games, the AI can be smart, but I feel a lot of times they just cheat and give the AI better stats to make them harder. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts about that, Walsh? How paranoia and syphilis might affect a 5-on-5 where these guys have to fight to the death?
Maybe not exactly a 5-on-5, but I don't think either of the. I don't know about Ivan himself, but I don't think either of these guys are really actual warriors. I think they're commanders, right?
More or less, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not documented, but some people say that Hernan didn't even see combat until he actually reached the mainland of Mexico. He was just a diplomat until then.
Yeah, I guess it's one of those things. It comes down to the individual. We've asked before, what makes a warrior on here. And I don't know. I feel through the lens of time, people get benefits a lot more. Because if you picture someone in steel plate and with a sword, you're warrior. Well, that guy's a warrior. But if you think about it in modern terms, anybody can buy a bulletproof vest and a gun. Does that make you a warrior?
What about if you play for Golden State? Does that make you a warrior?
That it does indeed.
That's a loophole. So all you have to do if you want to be a warrior and not do that is get on the Golden State Warriors, join the NBA, and pray you become drafted.
Also, last thing about the intro I wanted to point out before we get to our next segment is a little fun fact we noticed while watching. I had to send you guys a snap immediately. So we're recording this episode the same week as we do the Saddam Hussein Pol Pot episode. And there's a lot of similarities between these episodes in that the biggest factor in them is basically like the psychological health of the two warriors. And this is at the 5-minute, 7-second mark. It's blink and you'll miss it. So Robert Daly is addressing the hosts, right? And he's talking about their psychological health X factors. That is Ivan and Hernan. Well, I noticed that in the background at this frame, you can see Saddam Hussein is on Rob's computer, old Bobby D's computer. And I was like, did they rip some of the psychological talk from that episode and put it into this one? And I was like, or is it just like a blooper, like that software loops and they forgot to edit it out? It's the former, because I went back. So his shirt changes colors. So what you're getting is an over-the-shoulder shot of him addressing the boys, and you can see the collar is blue with black stripe. And then they flash to his face, and you can see he's wearing the blue shirt, the blue with the black stripe. I did take a side-by-side picture. I'm sure Craig will do some fun editing about it. And then it cuts to the boys. It cuts to like Armand's face or whatever. And then it cuts back to Robert Daly when he says, the psychological profiles are going to be really important here. And he's got a different shirt on and the Saddam on the screen in the background. And I was like, you got caught, boy.
Maybe they thought they could get away with it because it's a similar shirt. It's got the stripes, but it's like...
It looks very similar. In fact, I sent the video to you guys in the Snapchat, and I felt like I'm going to send the side-by-side of the two photos because when you watch the video I sent you, they look like the same shirt still.
Yeah. And
definitely not, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're skeptical and maybe the colors look the same, because they do like... maybe it's just how it was shot. If you look at the stripe is different. It's one of them is white borders with a black stripe, and the other was the opposite. So
dead giveaway.
Yeah, dead giveaway. I'm sorry.
You got caught.
I like to say that nothing gets past us, but just think how many gaffes like that happen that we don't even notice.
So much shit gets past
What was the comment
us.
you said? You were like, we're the first people to notice this in 10 years.
Yeah, I have a headcanon out there where like there was one guy that edited every episode of Deadliest Warrior. He was only one guy. And he watches this podcast, and every time we catch him on something, he just goes, "Nice, boys." Nice. He's it's like, I finally got caught,
I just want to say, if you edited Deadliest Warrior, on or off the record, we need to talk to you.
Yeah.
That's maybe what I'm most interested in the entire
honestly
production is that
kind of coveted. Like, yeah.
I mean, you guys got clout now. You should be able to get anybody.
Yeah.
Right. You'd think.
Thanks, Mom.
So we have Craig's Aftermath corner. We have Matt's movie corner. But before that, pardon the pun, we're going to go to Lucas's health coroner. Am I right, boys? So, Lucas, Dr. Dorian says Hernan Cortez is a, quote, classic psychopath. He says the same exact thing about Saddam, I think, in the Saddam episode. The classic psychopath as opposed to the postmodern psychopath, the hipster psychopath.
The beanie-wearing psychopath.
That anything gets between Hernan and his gold, his psychopath mind is going to eliminate with no remorse. Now, Ivan the Terrible, he brings up, would treat his back pain with mercury. This would put him into a bipolar state where he'd have manic and depressive episodes. Quote, Mr. Nice Guy 1 second, and the next he's chopping your head off. This reminded me of the Joan of Arc episode, and that Dr. Dorian, I think because he's a doctor, they let him do all the psychiatry talk, but I don't think being an ER surgeon makes him good at this, because again, like you brought up in the Joan of Arc episode, Craig, being bipolar doesn't mean like you're a nice, cool guy in a manic state.
Yeah, it's not happy mode and angry mode. That's oversimplification.
Hey guys, I'm glad we're doing this podcast. Fuck you.
There's a term for that. It's called being a cartoon character.
Yeah.
Ivan would come out sometimes and he'd be like, "Yo, boys, you ready to squat up on the card? Let's go." And then they'd lose. They'd come in like second place in the battle royale, and Ivan would be like, rage quitting, swearing at his team, dropping all sorts of nasty gamer words.
That's Mike.
We love you, Mike.
Hitbox.
So Lucas, both these guys seem like dickheads, and Ivan seems like he's got a lot of problems going on. Can you give us your diagnosis?
I would love to.
Some of your notes?
Yeah, I got some medical notes for this episode. I'm going to start with Ivan here, and something that I found interesting, at least. So in 1963, the graves of Ivan and his sons were excavated and examined by Soviet scientists, and the analysis disproved earlier suggestions.
Like a science fiction movie.
This is the kicker here. Their analysis disproved earlier suggestions that he suffered from syphilis or that he was poisoned by arsenic. So apparently he didn't have syphilis. Maybe. At the time of his death, he was 5 foot 10 inches, weighed about 195 pounds, give or take, with a rather asymmetrical body. So did not have that good looks, that asymmetrical.
And he got shorter and fatter.
But he's 6 foot, so he's still got more girls than 5'4" Hernan.
Yeah. Well, 5 foot 10 at time of death, but he could have shrank because he was.
Yeah.
They did find high mercury content in his body. They found it in pretty much in the bones, and that he developed various bone diseases. But I will say, it's up to you if you want to trust Soviet scientists and their data. So Ivan the Terrible was described as being paranoid, psychotic, and prone to episodic outbreaks of mental instability that increased with his age. Some of this could have been contributed to his mercury use because it's literally toxic, as it was an old cure for syphilis, but then again, we're not sure if he has it now, and I do say cure very loosely there. He was also being described as a very sickly child suffering from diseases such as tuberculosis and scroopholia, which is just a medical term for localized tuberculosis in the neck. So Dr. Dorian constantly says that he suffered from ankylosing spondylitis, but that was not backed up by the excavation and the reanalysis of his bones. I did find a study that suggested there was possible temporal lobe syndrome, as it fits most of his traits. There was an entire study, an article that I found off like Google Scholar, and I downloaded the whole PDF just to find out it was like his entire medical record. I was so excited to read this. 100% in Spanish. And I took Spanish. I can read a little bit of Spanish. I cannot read a scholarly medical journal in Spanish. So no information there.
Nice.
What exactly caused him to go crazy? There's speculations. No one is 100% sure. Could have been... you can't provide like a diagnosis on a dead man, I guess. Could have been disease, religion, mental health issues, or various things. Do you want me to roll into Cortez?
Yeah, go ahead.
Wait, so the Ivan the Terrible one was in Spanish?
Yeah, isn't that weird? I guess a Spanish doctor must have performed like the report or something. And I downloaded the PDF. It was a bunch of pages. I was so hyped to read it. Spanish. If you ever read a scholarly article, they have like the abstract that tells you what the article is about before you get into it. Abstract was in English. So I was like, oh, sweet. Then as soon as I got to the report, Spanish.
That's how they get you.
Couldn't you just like copy paste into Google Translate?
Yeah, but
Send it on to our boy LL Maine.
Yeah.
Could have translated.
Got to work with him.
Yeah.
if anyone wants to read it, it's out there. So Hernan Cortez honestly was really hard to find any health or medical notes because everything that you type in just leads you to smallpox. So I couldn't find any definitive medical studies or proof that he suffered from any mental health diseases leading to his psychopathic mentality. There's tons of speculation on what it was, but I couldn't find any like solid medical analysis from a reputable source that told me what it was. The only interesting thing I could find is, we might cover this in his history, but during his death, he suffered from pleuritis, which is the inflammation of the membranes that surrounded the lungs and in his chest cavity. He was described as also being pale and sickly as children, so these boys have that in common.
Nice.
Pale, sickly children who
I
grew
got
up in a terrible people.
a couple health things on him.
Yeah,
I don't know. Like, this. I don't have much sources. I don't have a bibliography here. But
Yeah,
It was
feel free to
recorded.
roll into some health stuff here.
A special appearance by Nurse Walsh.
So it was recorded that he did have syphilis, and it actually while he was in Cuba, and he actually missed the first expedition to Mexico because he had syphilis, which may have been why he wanted to go so badly the next time. And then during his conquest in Mexico, during some rest after they got routed a little bit in a battle, he was like semi-conscious for about a week because he suffered some injuries, including multiple shots to the head. And when they dug up his bones afterwards, there were fractures on his skull. So, you know, a little bit of head trauma, CTE.
So he took some real like physical head trauma that can definitely affect like, the way you behave.
Bones
But that
don't
was
lie.
that was like in the middle of the conquest. So, you know, he'd already made some major decisions before that.
Yeah.
But it could affect his post.
So one interesting thing I think about this is they go back and forth between this thing where like Ivan is sickly and he's like literally crazy. And Cortez is just like a psycho, antisocial behavior kind of guy. And I do wonder, because then on another hand, they're like, he's also super charismatic, which I know psycho and sociopaths can be. I'm not a psychologist, but some part of me just wants to say, like, is that making an excuse for Hernan Cortez? Because, like, what if was he just a dick? You know what I mean? Like, what if he wasn't a psycho who didn't feel any remorse about this stuff? Like, what if he was just an asshole?
Yeah, I'm a psycho.
Like, he did it for the gold, baby.
You remember that stupid Tech 9 and Hobson song?
I remember that good Tech 9 and Hobson song.
I think that was about Hernan Cortez, wasn't it?
Yeah, the Caribou Lou. So, all the notes you guys had on mental health here?
Yeah, pretty much.
Nice.
Close the corner thing.
Yep. That was it for Lucas's health coroner. Now on to
Let's put a fade in.
a very quick version of Matt's movie corner. So not too much to say this time, guys. I didn't watch like any of this stuff except for like one of them. So there's of course the DreamWorks movie, The Road to El Dorado, came out in 2000. Hernan Cortez is the main antagonist in the movie. It's not historically accurate at all, but Hernan Cortez, voiced by the legendary Jim Cummings. Yes, it's spelled that way.
It's the voice of Winnie the Pooh.
It is. So
Shout out to Disney.
Jim Cummings is one of those voice actors that you've never heard of him before, probably, but he's literally in every frickin' show you've ever watched or every video game you've ever played.
So he's a Winnie the Pooh. Blood is sweeter than water, Christopher Robin. Or sweeter than honey. What is Winnie the Pooh like? Honey?
I usually, yes. It's not blood, you know.
Well, that's from that horror remake or whatever, where he's like, blood is sweeter than honey.
Yeah, they got Jim Cummings to do that.
Really?
No, I just made that up.
I always like to mention a classic for season 3 because it fits like the vibes of some of the historical footage they show, or the like faux historical footage they show. So the captain from Castile came out in 1947. I did not watch it, but I wrote it down because it had some good critical reviews, and it also is featuring Cesar Romero as Hernan Cortez, who some of you might know is the original Joker in the Adam West Batman TV show. He's the guy who refused to shave his mustache as the Joker, so they just painted over it. It looks really funny. For Ivan the Terrible, I have even less. I'm going to be honest. Like, apparently the two most famous movies about him are these biopics, Ivan the Terrible Part 1 and Ivan the Terrible Part 2. They were made in 1944 and 1958.
Yikes. They
are two epic historical biopics that are actually Soviet films. So the films are in Russian. They're by a Soviet director. I didn't watch them, but if this is up your alley,
I heard those movies are terrible.
I got a Matt's movie corner question for you. If you had to pick an actor to play Ivan the Terrible, like they're making a new blockbuster movie about him, who would you pick?
Vin Diesel.
I got mine.
Vin Diesel.
Gary Busey.
Vin Diesel.
Gary Busey. I'm thinking.
Ask me who I would cast as Hernan Cortez.
Who'd you cast?
Vin Diesel.
Hey. There's actually a Hernan Cortez show on Amazon, I believe. I haven't watched it, but I might look it up after this.
Is there?
Yeah.
Could check it out.
It might be in Spanish as well, but
the only other thing I wrote down is, of course, this is a repeat from the Teddy Roosevelt episode, but probably the most popular depiction you guys have seen of him is in Night at the Museum, Battle of the Smithsonian. Ivan the Terrible is portrayed by Christopher Guest and is featured, I had to write this down, teaming up with fellow DW alumni Napoleon and Al Capone.
Oh, someone watched the show. Yeah. Someone was a fan.
Someone's a fan.
3 losers.
And I feel like they probably lose to Ben Stiller in the movie too, probably.
Are they like the evil guys in the movie then?
I'm assuming so. It's been a hot minute since I've seen a museum movie, but
Dude, you don't watch that every year?
Watch that every week.
every year. Every year,
You're
baby.
missing out.
So, do you guys want to? I think I'll do experts first before we get into history. They kind of interplay it together on the show. So let's just do the experts. Up first, you got Vladimir Orlov, who is billed as a...
Which one is he representing?
Latino studies professor.
Vladimir Orlov.
The University of Buenos Aires.
Vladimir Orlov, billed as Russian Special Forces trainer. The show states he is a period pole and sword arm specialist who trained with the Russian Special Forces. We get a number of callbacks in this episode, like to quite a few warriors at different times. Obviously, we see a lot of Aztec Jaguars, but right here we're getting the Spetsnaz callback. We get a few more as the episode goes on.
I like this dude. This dude's just he's just a chill ass dude.
I call him
Good
Good
old- the
Guy
whole
Vlad.
episode.
Good guy Vlad.
I call him Good Guy Vlad
Yeah,
the whole
he
time.
really
And
is,
you know
'cause
why?
He's
He's
got
truthful.
integrity.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He's like,
you guys.
I did get tired. He's
Yeah.
like, yeah.
Most people are just like, oh, my weapon, this is the greatest weapon that like ever.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, I'm kind of tired.
Yeah.
I'm going to keep it real with you, Chief.
Yeah.
And he just, his whole demeanor, I would agree. I
He's
honestly
just a chill
wanted,
ass dude.
when I was watching this, I want to nominate Vlad to be on our best experts of season 3 list, because
I liked him.
he's giving off Sonny Puzikas vibes. He just seems, he's not running his mouth. He's just kind of cool. And he does good like with the weapon tests and all that too. So I literally could find absolutely nothing that said
He's a
trained.
ghost.
No, I found a lot about him. I couldn't find anything that said he actually trained with the Spetsnaz.
I looked for a while too.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah.
No record of it. But I mean, that doesn't surprise me
Yeah,
either.
what do you expect to be able to just Google Spetsnaz records?
Yeah,
On his LinkedIn.
Matt tried to infiltrate the Spetsnaz Facebook group for like retired
Who is
Spetsnaz.
this guy? Have you seen him?
Yeah.
but I did find quite a bit on him. So he's an actor, a stunt actor, and assistant director. He's worked on both small and high budget movies like Ant-Man and the Wasp. I also have to give a special shout out. He did stunts for the animated movie Beowulf, which is a favorite amongst us.
You pronounced it wrong. It's oof.
He seems to mostly do stunts and stunt coordinating. He's been nominated for 4 separate awards, and he won one occasion for his stunt work and like action directing, stuff like that. So sort of following a pattern of giving us the stunt actor who tests the weapons and like a professor or something that comes in for the info, the nerd guy. Second on Team Vlad is Andrew Jenks, PhD. He is billed as a professor of Russian studies, and they say he works at California State University. So Andrew is another example of the season 3 overqualified expert. He has a BA from Bucknell, a master's from the University of Michigan, and a PhD from Stanford. He's authored multiple books about Russian history and culture. He's still like working and researching today. And he still teaches classes on the history of modern Europe and Russia at California University, Long Beach. So he's living it up. He's studying the Ruskies during the day, and then at night he's getting tan on the beach. You know what I'm saying?
Now I got to shit on him.
Okay.
I got to dunk on him for a minute here.
Prepare to be dunked, bitch.
Whether this is the deadliest warrior, like Fed line or goof. So you'd say this man is smart. He has a PhD, and he literally specializes in Russian studies, is what you're telling me. His opening line that he gets to speak, he says, Ivan's mother died when he was 3, and his father died when he was 8. That is incorrect.
Really?
Yes, it is the opposite. I double checked many times.
Dude,
His father died when he was 3. His mother died when he was 8.
Hey,
Yeah.
we're calling the
PhD
fucking dean.
revoked.
Literally, what he has a PhD in, he said an
More
incorrect
than
statement.
him.
Yeah,
Pretty much.
yeah.
Where's my PhD?
I'm gonna call the chair level 3 of that college. We're gonna rat.
So whether he was just reading like a poorly written line from Deadliest Warrior, yeah, he said it incorrectly.
He probably just got those first moments on the mic nervousness. Yeah.
Listen,
That some folks get.
We get those moments, first moments on the mic, but we are not paid as a Stanford professor.
Yeah.
So I don't know if something that basic. What
for
kind of
yourself.
fucking idiot doesn't know the age of his parents
When they died.
when they died? Yeah,
I mean, that's a pretty big goof though for your first line.
yeah.
That is funny that he muffs the first.
First thing he says is a lie.
It's perfect for Deadliest Warrior.
It is.
Like nobody double checked.
But I caught it immediately. Like, I'm
The
sitting there.
editor didn't do a simple Google search before he left it in. He didn't take it out. It's really funny.
I'm like playing on my phone and he goes, he says the line incorrect. My ears just went, whoop.
I mean, as we know, Deadliest Warrior, like, do you think there's a chance, like, they didn't check the background of some of their experts or, like, simulation people? Or
So-
did they just take their word for it?
Speaking of history, then the show cuts to the Russian history segment. So let's kick it over to you, Lucas. For Ivan the Terrible, the show states that Prince Ivan lost both his parents when he was very young, and that he was subjected to being under the thumb of the Russian aristocracy until adulthood, likely suffering from mental abuse as a child. The grief led him to turn to the Bible for comfort, and when he reached adulthood and was crowned Tsar, he began to govern with this religious extremism. Ivan believed himself to be the Archangel Michael, and that it was his duty to destroy God's enemies. The show claims that under his rule, the Russian Empire doubled in size. So, Lucas, please tell us some of your research about Ivan the Terrible. Does the show's portrayal hold up, and what does it leave out?
Yeah, it mostly holds up here. Who was the guy exactly? He was the Grand Prince of Moscow, 1533 1547, and the first Tsar of Russia from 1547 to 1584. Little known is about his appearance, and all existing portraits were made after his death, so those pictures you see online are not necessarily accurate. In 1567, Ambassador Daniel Prince von Beroe described him as a tall, stout, and full of energy man. His eyes are big and observing and restless. His beard is reddish-black, long and thick, but most of the other hairs on his head are shaved off, as with the time.
Can we give a shout out to the absolutely over the top, dialed up to 11
The actor
portrayal
for him,
the actor
yeah.
gives him on this movie? He's just constantly like shaking into the camera. There's that scene you were laughing at where it's just him holding his hand over a candle flame.
Yeah.
He's just like something you would do at like a party in high school.
Yeah,
Just
where you're like
to
13.
Impress a girl, like, check it out. Look, it doesn't even hurt.
I could do it longer. So he was born August 25th, 1530 in Kolozhnikov, something along those lines.
Yeah.
He was the first son of Vasily III and his second wife, Elena Glixnica, something along those lines. He was named Ivan in honor of St. John the Baptist because it was close to the day of the beheading, which falls on August 29th.
Wait. Right. We're just laughing. He was named Ivan in honor of St. John the
I don't know.
Baptist.
I read that and I was like,
His name was probably different before he became St. John, probably.
It's
I don't know.
just the cognate. Ivan is the Russian cognate of John.
Thank you, Brendan. This is why we have you on here.
So I was going to make a joke that
that was my next line.
Ivan means John. But that's kind of right. That's why in Russia they say, I'm going to go to the Ivan.
That's why they're like, I'm going to cut my field on my Ivan Deere tractor.
All right, Lucas, give us some more.
All right, let me lay this line.
Wait, what'd you say?
What's Vlad then? Like Jim?
Bob Jim. So let me lay this line on you. When he was 3 years old, his father died from an abscess and inflammation on his leg that developed into blood poisoning. So Ivan was proclaimed the Grand Prince of Moscow at the age of 3. So his mother initially acted as regent until she died at age 8 in 1538. many believing she was poisoned. The regency then altered between feuding boyar families that fought for control, and Ivan, in his own writings, said that he felt neglected and offended. So this was kind of like where the show hints at that he was like an abused kid. It was kind of like a little bit of a battle of who he was the real roller, but all these people around him were kind of battling who was in control of him.
When you're a kid, it's hard to like enforce your reign, I guess.
Yeah. But he got to in 1547 when he was 16 years old. He was crowned the first Tsar of all of Russia, and because he was old enough to rule at that point. He then married his first wife, Anastasia Romanovna.
Don't worry.
Yeah. Or something along those lines. And she became the first Tsarista. Those people who make your coffee. Newly being crowned, he wanted to send a message to the world that he was the supreme ruler of the country and will not be questioned. He was now a divine leader appointed to enact God's will, as church text described the Old Testament kings as czars and Christ as heavenly czars. Despite his name, Ivan the Terrible, the early part of his reign was actually part of peaceful reforms and modernization. He revised the common laws. He formed a standing army, established the Zemsky Sobor, the first Russian parliament of feudal estates, and he confirmed the position of the church within the Council of the 100 Chapters, which unified rituals of the whole country. And lastly, he introduced self-government to the rural regions, which were populated by peasantry. So, 1553, he suffered a near-fatal illness, and that he was thought to not recover from. And this kind of started his downcline a little bit. That's when these boyar families that surrounded him quickly turned their back when they thought he was going to die, and he became distrustful and angered by them. In 1550s is also when he began his expansion towards Europe, and in 1558 he went to war in an attempt to establish Russian rule in what is present-day Latvia and Estonia. That's the war that they highlight on the show. I forget what they call it, Latvian or something war. 1560s brought Russian hardships that led to a dramatic change of Ivan's policies. The country was being devastated by drought, famine, and unsuccessful wars against the Polish and Lithuanian Commonwealth. Ivan's first wife had died, and it was suspected to be poisoning, and Ivan was deeply hurt. And this was believed to be one of the reasons his personality changed. Some of the boyar family defected to Lithuania, further angering him. This led to the first wave of persecutions from Ivan as he exiled and executed or forcibly tortured prominent members of the boyar clan with unquestionable accusations of conspiracy. So what were his favorite methods of torture? They included boiling alive, impalement, being roasted over an open fire, or being torn limb by limb by horses that we see later. He also had a tendency to cut off the ears of workers as he walked by them for whatever reason. He would just walk by workers and just...
He goes, oop, got your ear.
Got you.
Hey, Vladimir, come here for a second.
Because everyone's named Vladimir.
Yeah.
By 1550, the plague facing the country was so terrible it was killing 600 to 1,000 people daily in Moscow. Ivan began to grow suspicious that the noblemen of the wealthy city Novgorod were planning to defect over and turn the city to Lithuania. This prompted him to order a raid on the city, in which it was burned and pillaged, including the surrounded village. Number of victims is estimated to be around 60,000 men, women, and children, and lasted for 5 weeks. Although this is heavily debated, as many historians thought the kill count was closer to 10 to 20,000 people, so a lot less. In later years of his reign, Russia began to receive raids from the Crimean Tatars, which mainly to capture slaves, and they repeatedly raided Moscow region. So this is the 1571 4,000-strong Crimean and Turkish army launched a large-scale raid and devastated the unprotected towns and villages of Moscow. This led to the famous Fire of Moscow in 1571, and historians estimated the casualties between 10 and 80,000, which is a huge window. Over the course of his life, he had at least 9 wives with various children, and on March 28th, 1584, he died from a stroke while playing chess with Bogdan Belsky. Upon his death, his throne was left to his middle son, Fyodor, a weak-minded figure who died childless in 1598, which kind of ended his line, which occurred whenever that kid died. It started the times of troubles within Russia, which is, like a very significant period. That's it.
Interesting.
Actually, a little bit about Ivan as well.
Yo.
So I have a fun little story. I have a friend at work. She's from Siberia. And so I believe her actual citizenship is that she's Russian, but she's also like Mongolian. So she's got a lot of, overlap. She's basically Mongolian and like Russian. And we were talking about like, her home or whatever today. And I was like, well, actually it's kind of embarrassing. I have a podcast. We're talking about Ivan the Terrible. And she was like, oh, she was being nice. She was like, oh, what's it called? And I was like, this is the Deadliest Warrior podcast. And she goes, I can't find it. And I was like, it's like, you fucking kidding me?
You're like, that's the biggest dagger to the heart you could have said.
I was like, what do you mean? Is something wrong with her SEO? So, but it was funny. She gave me a couple of fast facts, nothing too crazy. In Russia, he's known as Ivan Grozny, which just means Ivan the Terrible in Russian. And that one of the things that he's most known for is, and I'm sorry if you mentioned this, that he like beat his son to death or something. And that. Yeah, there's a famous painting of it, and that apparently it's just like,
yeah, I've seen that where he's like holding the kid's head, and it's all beaten in pretty much. It's all bloody.
Yeah. And she says that that's like what people think about whenever that people mention him. So
too bad he wasn't on an NFL team. They would have covered it up.
Yikes.
Yeah, pretty much. But yeah, shout out. I was like,
the truth hurts.
I was like, I also, do the Mongolian experts. Too bad I didn't talk to her about Genghis Khan.
Genghis Khan.
Those facts were fast.
I know, but
Nice.
little insight.
So Craig tried, but he could not get another girl to watch the podcast besides my mom. One of these days we will.
we must. I think
happen.
there's a glitch that we don't. If you select your gender as female, you don't show up in search results. There's probably so many hotties searching for the Deadliest Warrior podcast that do not see it because of this glitch.
I bet.
We're shadow banned to female watchers.
Yeah, probably for good reason.
So, Lucas, I will mention before going on to the Hernan experts that in the aftermath, it comes up that Ivan had 9 wives and that he died of a heart attack. And Kieran Elliott makes the comment that he would have had a heart attack too if he had 9 mother-in-laws. Classic bit.
Yeah. Well, so the other thing I want to bring up
mother-in-law is
too-
really riding me.
Oh, so you reminded me of the aftermath. I didn't put this in Craig's aftermath corner just because I was so taken aback by what Robert Daly said about the sim. But the professor guy makes an interesting point, talks about the end of his life, that there was some debate with his marriages of what his goal was, and that the theory, at least his theory, was that he really wanted out. Like, he didn't want to be leader of Russia anymore. And so he kept trying to leave, and he kept marrying and divorcing people. And so when he died out of spite, it was like chaos because they all felt entitled to the throne. And that was like his way of like, fuck you. So
Was that Andrew Jank who said that? The
Yeah.
PhD? Ooh. Take that with a grain of salt, man.
Robert Daly said something, I accept it, but I don't know.
it's like, oh, this is Ivan, just John the Good. That's what he was talking about.
So moving on to the Hernan Cortez experts, we have Jason Heck, who is billed as a 16th century weapons expert. Walsh, do you want to give us your meme that you loved about Jason?
It was like right at the beginning of the episode when he's first introduced. He's talking about it. He's like, "There's no way. He's just gonna win." And he just has this blank stare, and he's a little bit cross-eyed. You can see it. And it's he's just gonna win.
It's amazing it's amazing with the freeze image and like with it. The
I just
text
took a
saying,
picture of it and I sent it to the group with my face when it's just gonna win.
So Jason is an actor and a stunt actor who's worked on a few other projects, but nothing too crazy or major. So Jason played a musketeer in season 2 of Deadliest Warrior. So there you go. We have a lot of that on this episode too. You guys will see a whole lot of dipping the wick in the old family bloodline.
Really?
Yes,
I didn't pick up
there's
on it.
quite a few. I'll save it for when we get to it. So we also have Kyle Lopez, who's billed as a Spanish colonial expert. I did find him on IMDb. It was hard to research outside of IMDb because Kyle Lopez. There are too many more famous people named Kyle Lopez. His real name is Kyle Schroeder. And that, I know, and that's how he's credited on IMDb. So he's listed as an actor and assistant on IMDb, and he hasn't been in too much, but he did play a character named Jeb on one episode of 1,000 Ways to Die, which we all know is the sequel podcast to this one.
Yeah.
Either that or Mansers. Boy, if no women watch now, can't wait till we get to Mansers.
Leave your vote in the comments.
It was difficult to look up any more about him, not only because like there's more famous people named Kyle Lopez, there's also a famous musician named Kyle Schroeder. So honestly, this guy comes off to me, they just call him an expert. They don't call him a professor. He gets the least screen time out of any of the experts. He sort of comes off to me as just one of those guys that he's comes out of like one of those guys who he shows up as an expert on Deadliest Warrior and you never see him again in anything else. Like it just is, it's really hard to find.
Reading off cards the whole time. Like I couldn't find anything about this guy.
He gives off those vibes. He gives off those vibes too.
Yeah.
He was a world championship kickboxer.
Right. I wrote this down. Is Kyle Lopez our Hernan Cortez stand-in? Because we obviously don't know what he looked like, but
I would almost say it's more Jason. It's obvious that Vlad is the Ivan stand-in, but I would almost say it's more Jason just because Jason is testing the weapons. It's either got to be the guy testing weapons, but it's always the guy talking the most shit, and I feel like Jason is talking more shit than Mr. Schroeder. So. I don't know if his middle name is Lopez or if he has but it was really funny that I saw that. I was like, do you think they changed that to make him more credible as a Hernan expert?
Wouldn't surprise me.
So then the show dives into some of Hernan Cortez's history. I'll probably kick this one over to Walsh. Walsh, the show states that Hernan Cortez is obsessed with rumors he heard about gold in the New World. He led 500 conquistadors, the show claims, into the heart of the Aztec Empire to conquer it and plunder the wealth within it. 500 conquistadors versus an empire of 5 million. However, they had guns, cannons, and horses, all of which the Aztecs had never seen before. The show also mentions Cortez's use of torture, specifically citing the garrote. The show states he slaughtered 250,000 Aztecs and conquered most of Mexico and Central America in a period of 2 years.
Yep.
So tell us about Hernan Cortez. What does the show get right? What does it leave out? And was the garrote a real thing?
I didn't really see much about the garrote, but general torture was used quite a bit to learn about whereabouts the gold was. Before he even knew about the Aztec Empire, he was torturing the Mayans, I believe, or just questioning them. And they would point west. They would always just point west, be like, go over that way, like it's not here. But so I just have a little kind of like a timeline on Hernan here. So he started in Cuba, where he was not the governor, he was like a diplomat of sorts. And originally he got syphilis, so he missed his first expedition. He managed to convince the governor to let him lead the next expedition. And but at the last minute, the governor got jealous of how popular Cortez was among the men, and he gave the position to somebody else, like the day before it was supposed to leave. And then, so that guy ended up mysteriously dead, and Hernan had taken all the men in the ships and gone to Mexico.
Mysteriously dead.
So right off the bat, he was doing all of this without the authority of the Spanish crown. And his basic idea was, I'm going to find the gold. They didn't really even know about the Aztecs at that point, but he was like, I'm just going to prove myself, and then the crown will have to legitimize my decisions. So he left Cuba. 500 men, was that pretty accurate? They said he only had 12 arquebuses when he first left, 12 cannon, and he had horses, and he also had war dogs, which were like mastiffs, I believe.
Cool.
So he first landed in the Yucatan Peninsula, where he met the people of the different Mayan tribes. He found a, what do you call it? shipwrecked sailor, like a shipwrecked Spaniard who had landed in the Yucatan and actually learned some of the Mayan language. So he was using him to translate. So then the Mayans are like, go west, get out of here. The gold's over that way. So then they go and they land more west, and they found the city of Veracruz. Once they get to Veracruz, he trades with some of the locals. He talks to them. That's all his mission was supposed to be, was to trade, conduct diplomacy, and then leave. So after he had done that, he built this like sort of city hall, and in the city hall, he set up this like kangaroo court almost, and he was like, "I've fulfilled my duties, and therefore I'm no longer under the authority of the crown, or under the authority of the governor of Cuba, and I'm free to explore as I wish." So he kind of just like he was a lawyer, like he practiced law in Spain, I believe. So he kind of like used these like little loopholes to kind of get his way. So he was a clever guy, and you'll see later how bold he was as well. But he was really smart and very like situationally aware. So after learning about the Aztec Empire, he's like, all right, well, I gotta go. So they start marching west. Montezuma, the current emperor, hears about these guys, but Spaniards had been there before, and they weren't too worried about them, because at the time the Aztec Empire was at the strongest it's ever been. It had millions of people under its control, but it was an empire like any other, where it contained within it were multiple different tribes and cultures that didn't mesh well together. Kind of like the downfall of every empire is that they create these subordinates and then they rebel. So he ends up meeting a different tribe that is in active war with the Aztecs called this is gonna be bad. We're gonna butcher so many names because Aztec names are so brutal. The Tlaxcala clan.
Nice.
So he meets the Tlaxcala clan, and
that actually means John in Aztec.
Yeah. So after a few skirmishes with them, they're like pretty impressed with the Spanish because they have these guns and horses. They've never seen horses before. So they eventually invite them to the capital, where they create an alliance. So that's what the show kind of doesn't really talk about. He had 500 men, and eventually he did get some more reinforcements from other Spaniards, but he had an army of natives fighting with him on his side against the Aztecs. An army of like tens of thousands, maybe even 100,000.
Were they Zondes?
Well, Shaka would like them.
Shaka would like that.
Shaka would like that, but no.
Cool.
Okay, so I gotta try and fast track this. I feel like I'm dragging a bit, but so eventually, he meets the Tlaxcala, and Montezuma's sending emissaries to him with gifts of gold and jewels and stuff. He's like, I'm just gonna send these emissaries to them, and hopefully they'll just go away with these gifts. But Hernan Cortez is like, he wants to go to the city. Like, he hears stories of the city. I don't know if you guys see pictures of Tenochtitlan. Tenochtitlan, yeah. But it's a beautiful city in like the middle of a lake. Like, it's just something incredible, right? So he's like, I gotta go here. I gotta meet this emperor.
Yeah, we talked about a little bit on the Jaguar episode.
Yeah, Tenochtitlan, Tenochtitlan, something like that. I had it, dude. I was saying it all day just to get it right, and I lost it. So long story short, he marches there. The emperor basically invites him in, even though he's already. Well, actually, Cholula was the first. He marches to Cholula, which is an Aztec city. He conducts some diplomacy with them, blah, blah, blah. He gets paranoid that they're plotting against him, and he destroys the whole city. He massacres everybody.
Nice.
Thousands of people die. And this is an active Aztec city, it's a vassal. So eventually he gets to Tenochtitlan, and the emperor invites him in. And people are like, what are you doing inviting this guy in? He just murdered a bunch. And there's a million theories about why the emperor actually allowed him to walk into the city. Some say that they thought they were gods or prophets of the gods because they're so powerful. Some say that there was an ancient hospitality, he had to allow them in, or he would be breaking ancient customs. Either way, they march into the main capital. They eventually take the emperor, kidnap him, and basically use him as a puppet um, to control the city. This leads to civil unrest. Um, Another Spaniard, Cortez gets word of other Spaniards coming to stop his activities from Cuba. So he leaves a garrison in the city, but he leaves to go stop this other guy. So he ends up actually stealing that other guy's army and killing him. And then he marches back with reinforcements. During that time, full rebellion in the city against the Spanish. He goes back into he fights his way back in the city, meets up with his garrison, and then they have to leave the city. And they take severe, very heavy losses leaving the city. They march back to Tlaxcala for a couple of months, and then they regroup and they come back and they lay siege to the city completely. During this time, smallpox had taken effect in the city, and they were already quite weakened by the disease. So he builds boats, and they dig a mile-long trench into the lake, and he takes these boats in so that he can. So the city has 3 main causeways. So he blocks all the causeways, and then he has boats to stop supplies coming in from the water, and he basically just waits them out. He cuts off the fresh water supply, and after about 75 days, they finally. Montezuma has been dead by now. They killed him before that, I believe, and his cousin had taken the emperors. They lay siege to the city, and then August 13th, 1521 is the official date that people have as the end of the Aztec Empire. So after that, they basically pillage the entire city, plunder it. We talked about this in the Aztec Empire. They basically razed it all the way to the ground. And that is now the location of Mexico City. Mexico, the name coming from the Mexica, which was the main tribe of the Aztecs.
Wow. Huh.
So quite a lot. After that, he goes on to conquer like Honduras and things like that. But the crown legitimizes his choices, but then he ends up in debt. A lot of weird shit happens afterwards. But basically, he conquers this entire land with an army of maybe 1,000 to 2,000 Spaniards and a ton of natives. Eventually turning on the natives, basically.
Naturally.
Using a class system, kind of similar like a caste system, it's called encomienda, where full-blood Spaniards are at the top, mixed, and then complete natives are at the bottom. Torture, forced labor, slavery. Eventually, even turning on the allies that helped him capture the city. Smallpox was thought to have taken out anywhere from 50 to 90% of the native population in Mexico and the Americas, I guess. And they find so many riches. Like they say he wanted gold, but I don't know how much of that. He definitely wanted gold, but I think once he saw what was actually in Mexico and his empire, he really just wanted to control. He didn't want the city to be destroyed. He wanted to control his empire. But at the end of the day, he had to destroy the city to achieve that. But he ended up finding so much gold and silver that he overinflated the Spanish market. Not him, but the Spanish market became extremely strong and then overinflated, essentially weakening the Spain in the colonial powers. And after that, I believe they had some sort of revolt or something.
Interesting.
I didn't look too much into that, but yeah, they basically overinflated the economy. How much treasure?
So I like that you touch on throughout that history some of the more charming personality of Hernan Cortez, which I feel like factored into their decision on who would win. But I feel like Hernan Cortez doesn't get a whole lot of coverage in the episode. Really?
Oh, he was a savvy diplomat, and he was described as an excellent speaker, and people really, he was very persuasive.
Good guy.
Don't forget a douche.
And definitely a good guy, not bad at all.
Right.
Any atrocities or genocide.
Didn't slaughter tons of native people.
Well,
Ivan, you want to talk about your record over here?
So
Okay, John.
What I'm getting at is,
John.
you know, what ultimately decides this episode is like psychological health. But I think the show says that a lot. But I think what it is it's actually leadership decides who wins by proxy of like
And he
psychological
was
health.
an excellent leader.
Yeah, and I was a little surprised by that because I was like, okay, we're being told Ivan's crazy. How come, you know, he's performing so poorly commanding his men compared to someone like Cortez? So I did appreciate you putting in there not just his charisma, but some of the tactics he was able to use in order to like outplay. You know, not saying he's a great guy, but in order to outplay an enemy, basically.
And this wasn't easy. He had to go, originally translating, he had to go through one guy who would translate to Mayan, and then he met somebody else who knew Mayan and the Aztec language, which was Nahuatl, I believe. So he went through two people to translate these like diplomatic deals, you know, something that none of the other Spaniards managed to accomplish because, you know, they just kind of wanted to conquer everything. But he was smart. He recognized that the empire was full of vassals that weren't happy with the Aztecs, and he exploited that. You know, so he was very like situationally aware of the political situation in the empire.
Divide and conquer, boys.
Literally,
Mhm.
it's a classic divide and conquer.
Nice. Well, does anyone else have anything more to add about the intro or the history of these warriors? Anything like that?
I was going to say, this show portrays Ivan like he has the mentality of like a 3-year-old on the battlefield. He was still a great commander that commanded armies.
Okay.
The show makes him out.
Did Ivan command in battles? Is there like I don't really know much.
I mean, he, in a way, yeah.
What's his,
I mean,
what's his generalship
his.
score?
Is he that good of a commander if you have to be like, in a way, he commanded battles?
Well, I mean, he commanded battles like any commander who's, you know, outside of the actual battle making the commands and like the calls for it.
That's the other thing is, you know, we test these warriors, but really we're just testing their subordinates and how well they fight.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
the tactics that they use.
That's definitely something that's not talked about enough in that they made these, you know, named warriors. They made this a 5-on-5 fight, and they spend the entire episode talking about the named warriors because for obvious reasons, that's why people are tuning in. But most of the bodies, you know, in this sim or in this fictional battle, most of the bodies that are going to be doing the killing and the dying are going to be the subordinates.
Yeah.
And not enough is talked about it. Like, you assume they're outfitted the same as the commander, but like, what are their stats?
Are there 5 Ivan clones? Like,
Yeah.
But and again, it gets
Did they have syphilis?
yeah. Every episode we talk about. We need a term for this where it's like just the sim problem. Like, what are we talking about?
Right.
It's
Yeah.
not
it's
even the
never
sim,
fun.
it's just the whole way the show looks at the
Well, I just mean like you get this like this mental like paradox where you can't obviously okay, I don't want to get too deep into it, but you can't have 1-on-1 if you have 2 like generals because that's not fair. You can't have 5-on-5. 5-on-5 is gonna be the closest you can get, but a lot of their weapons don't work for 5-on-5. And you get to the problem of okay, you're not really testing the warrior unless they're 5 clones. And when you talk about large scale like battalions, at that point you're not testing the warriors at all. Really,
You're testing
Just,
their
like,
generalship.
the generalship. It's not generalshiply warrior. It's deadliest. So that's the sim paradox.
well, like during the gun test, well, I guess we could get into this, but Armand is like, well, you know, he was taking mercury, like that might affect his accuracy or some shit.
yeah, like he's down there, he's Braveheart riding back and forth on the front lines. We're going to battle.
Drinking his mercury.
Yeah.
Vlad's downing a thermometer as he's shooting his pistol.
Maybe we should jump right into that.
It's a
Yeah.
freeze pop.
Yeah.
It's like,
It's like super power. Yeah, so speaking of the firearms, let's jump into weapons then. So the first weapons to get compared, we have Hernan Cortez's arquebus, a length of 44 inches, weight 9 pounds, caliber 69, nice,
let's move on.
69 to 80. And
Nice.
a muzzle velocity of 1,351 feet per second. Craig, I'm going to kick it over to you for this. What can you tell us about the arquebus? Because I get the impression it's like a significant weapon in history. So what's going on?
Yeah, so let me tell you a little about firearms, Matt.
Noted gun guy, Craig.
Yeah.
Craig's gun corner. Let's go there.
Craig's gun corner.
All right, let me tell you about the arquebus. Okay.
I am Ian with Forgotten Weapons. This is the arquebus.
I'll say unrelated to the show, which I think is an interesting point just for starters. Jeff mentions that the 69 caliber round could do more damage than modern firearms. I believe he says that's due to how it's like shaped or
Yeah, so it's because 50 caliber round is like a huge round in a modern firearm, and this is 69 caliber. The musket balls it's like a little different because modern firearms have like shape and ballistics.
They bring up too, it's the modern, a lot of bullets modern are jacketed. Too,
Yes.
and these are unjacketed, which whenever it hits a body, it's more liable to just explode.
It's basically that instead of a modern bullet, which is like this thin piece of lead, even, if there's a bigger bullet like that, this thing is just a big fucking ball of just like lead. So it's a lot less accurate, but when it hits you, it's just leaving a huge crater.
Yeah, we see that in the test too. We see
Yeah,
the massive
right.
wound.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, in terms of the history, this is a direct quote from, I believe it's Britannica. I think it's the same thing as Encyclopedia Britannica. So the arquebus, which is also spelled with an H at the beginning, is also called a hackbutt. The first gun...
That's kind of funny.
Pause.
Yes.
It's the first gun fired from the shoulder. A smooth bore matchlock with a stock resembling that of a rifle. The arquebus was invented in Spain in the mid 15th century. It was often fired from a support against which the recoil was transferred from a hook on the gun. Its name seems to derive from the German word Hackbus, meaning hooked gun. Brennan, confirm?
I can't remember German, but sure.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Confirmed. Thanks, John.
That was Brendan's confirmation corner.
The bore varied and its effective range was less than 650 feet, which is 200 meters. The arquebus was suspended by the larger musket. Superseded. Oh my God. Was superseded by the larger musket in the mid 16th century. It's a term that's applied to a range of firearms from the 15th to 17th century, even though it got usurped in the mid 16th. And apparently its contribution was a couple things. It's the matchlock, I guess, firing action, and then the under the barrel, if you play Call of Duty, attachment that you could use to mount on things is another trademark of the arquebus.
Got it.
So kind of the next natural evolution of the firearm. Initially, prior to the arquebus, they call it PA times. You would have one hand would light the little, would have a fire, and then it would fire the gun.
Similar to that pole gun or whatever, that try. What was that from?
Ming?
Oh, the
Yeah,
Ming
Ming
Warriors
Warriors.
3-barrel pole gun.
Yeah.
Yeah, yes, you're right. So that's like the same idea. And that's earlier version. This, you got the matchlock, and then you can mount it on something. So obviously pretty important to guns nowadays. Let's see. The matchlock was the first firearm equipped with a trigger mechanism, which is interesting. I guess it kind of goes with the matchlock, but I guess I sort of separated those in my head. And kind of the last bit I have here is that there was a debate at the time of what was superior, a longbow or an arquebus. And I found this very amusing. On the arquebus Wikipedia page, there's an entire section dedicated to this debate. And there's a Twitter account I follow called Scrub Quotes, which mostly like video games of people like being salty and like coming up with like stupid reasons. Like
I thought it was about the TV show.
no, it's like oh, you only won because his character, whatever. And this
Shout
is
out. So syphilis. That is a quote from the show Scrubs.
Is it?
Yeah.
I've never seen
The
it.
universe works in mysterious ways.
Right.
People. Our energies are aligned,
right.
I'll
but-
look for it on Scrub Quotes.
Okay. Anyway, So this is the scrub quote if I've ever heard one. Sir John Smith blamed the declining effectiveness of the longbow in part on English commanders who would place firearms at the front of their formations and bowmen in the back, where they could not even see their targets and aim appropriately. So there was like the longbow purists that were like, "Oh, come on! Like, you put us in the back, like, what do you expect?" They were like a dying breed. I thought that was very funny.
Like the new kids now are like, vinyls sound way better than like digital files.
Dude, the longbow, man, timeless.
Right.
This
So I thought that
MP3
was-
thing will never catch on.
Right. Yeah, the fire. You got to like press the.
This whole
These
gun
guns,
shit, man,
they'll
it's going
never-
nowhere.
they'll
It's
never
going.
go away.
Right. So I thought that was very amusing. You can read more about it on wikipedia.org. But yeah, that was it for the Harper.
Interesting. Yeah, I figured it would have like they like imply that it's got some historical significance, and then they don't go into it.
Yeah, I mean it's something about both guns that we see. They're the predecessors to flintlock, essentially. It's
Yeah.
like the first transition into what.
So what should I
modern
call it? Because I called it a flintlock at the beginning of this episode. What should I call
Matchlock.
it? Matchlock.
Yeah.
Okay. Shout out Matchlock. So after we get the intro to the arquebus, Jason fires it at 3 targets. So the test is there's 3 targets, each at varying distances. You have one at 30, 40, and 60 feet. And the first 2 targets are moving back and forth on a wire while the third target is static. So Jason fires 2 shots, hitting all 3 targets with a reload time of 56 seconds. So the first shot he puts through the 30-foot target and into the 40-foot target as well, and then he reloads and delivers a kill shot to the one 60 feet away. So I kind of like this. I don't even care if they had to fake it.
I was gonna say this one almost seems like it was such a lucky moment that they couldn't have faked it.
Yeah,
Like why would they come up with that?
I didn't
as a lie?
smell anything too fishy in this segment, and maybe I just wasn't paying attention enough, but they showed shots of him shooting and like
There was a complete.
that is our. You would be surprised how often it does not happen, but that is our litmus test for a true Deadliest Warrior test. Is like, do you get a shot of the man firing the weapon and it hitting a target all in like one shot? You know, 'cause you wouldn't believe how edited it is.
We saw some of that last week.
Even if it's fake, I didn't catch it. It seemed impressive, and I'm glad that we got a cool test with both these matchlocks.
Yeah.
I think it went well. So, what do we got afterwards? You know, Jeff comments that the reload time was killing him. Mac asks Vlad because Mac brings up this point where he's like, you fire this shot and you're reloading it and you know it's going to take a little bit to reload. Are you getting self-conscious in the moment? Are you going to start fumbling because you know you're vulnerable to being attacked? And, you know, Jason or Kyle counters by saying, well, you know, the Aztecs had never seen anything like this before. They kind of thought they were gods. And so Mac asks Vlad, he's like, do you think Ivan would think Cortez was a god? And Vlad's like, a what? It's just a funny little moment. And then Kyle, Mr. Schroeder Lopez, Kyle makes the claim that the conquistadors were the best organized army since the Roman legion. That just seems incorrect to me. Like a very large gap of time. And correct me if I'm wrong, were the conquistadors like an army, strictly speaking, Walsh? Or
I mean, honestly, they were kind of just, well, like, you know, they're trained soldiers, but I wouldn't say they were probably the best. A lot of them were just there for the gold, you know, the riches.
When I hear about the conquistadors, I think it makes me think a lot about like the Vikings almost, where they're hearing about the riches in this other land, and so it's like, well, let's go. We can go steal that shit. Let's just go do it.
Yeah.
And
they kind of have that feel of just like, even like that piratey, like marauder feel.
Yeah.
Like no one's watching over them. They're going into these new lands. They can kind of do whatever the hell they want.
And oh my God, I can't believe I forgot about this for the movie corner. In The Curse of the Black Pearl, is that Hernan Cortez's gold that's cursed?
That might be. I think you
Look
might
that
be right.
up. I think it might be. I'm serious. It might be Hernan Cortez's cursed gold, because don't a bunch of conquistadors show up in one of like the later movies?
Yeah, Treasure of Cortez is stored.
Hey.
It's featured in 2003 film.
How did I overlook that? My goodness.
882 pieces to be precise.
It's been a busy day. It's been a busy week, folks. So I'm sorry I missed out on that, but we caught it here. Cortez's gold, name dropped in Pirates of the Caribbean.
I also just invented a new word. Instead of precise or exact, it's presact.
Prezactly.
It's good for if you got constipation, take a Prozac. I know people are going to comment this. I know. I'm going to confirm that gold is not featured in either versions of the Pirates of the Caribbean attraction in Florida or California. So just make sure you guys know.
Well, going up against the Arquebus is Jack Sparrow's Pashal. Now, the Pashal has a length of 46 inches, a weight of 8 pounds, and the caliber 69 to 80 with a muzzle velocity of 1,155 feet per second. So it's very similar stats, like give an inch here, give a pound there.
Is there a reason they would have the same caliber?
It's probably just because that's what all guns fired at the
I'll rock your world here in a second when you want me to.
Yeah, so Lucas, go right ahead. Take us into the Pashal. What's going on there?
Well, the first thing I'll do, just for anyone curious, because we talked about Matchlock and Flintlock, the only difference between the two, Flintlock is newer than Matchlock. The firing mechanism is the different. In Matchlock, they had a burning piece of rope or a match that would come down and ignite the powder tray, which would ignite the charge. In Flintlock, it's a piece of flint that scrapes along and produces sparks to ignite it. And Flintlocks are probably better. I mean, they are better, but because you don't have to keep that burning piece of rope.
Yeah, the flint strikes and creates the spark that sets the powder off.
So what is the Pashal? It is a Matchlock arquebus. I really struggled to find any Matchlocks going by this name. I saw it mentioned in one or two places, but they were usually followed by Deadliest Warrior. So let's be clear here. Let me be clear. These guys have pretty much the same gun, just the two different styles that they decided to find for the show. There's a reason they're very similar in stats. The only major difference between them is the muzzle velocity, and the only justification I can give to this is for that quicker reload time. They explain that this model has a bigger hole drilled where you dump the powder.
Yeah.
So when the powder, I guess, goes down the barrel or something, it also comes out and fills the tray.
Interesting.
I did not understand what they were trying to explain.
Yeah, they didn't elaborate very well on what they meant by that.
They even have to ask a question on the aftermath, but that is what I gathered from it, is what you said, Lucas, is that there's like
a bigger hole,
almost a secondary pan, or there's more room for this extra powder so that...
But it doesn't ignite?
That's what's complicated. That's what is weird about it, is because if it's...
Well, the match is still held up away from the powder, but powder spills out when you reload it down the barrel, I guess, because the hole's bigger. It spills out into the tray. But then if you have a bigger hole leading into your barrel, that would logically, in my mind, reduce the muzzle velocity because more powder or more pressure is escaping out the side.
Yeah,
that's the only justification of the difference between these two rifles that I can give. Logically,
think they would have spent more time. Like, if you remember in the Musketeer episode, it is the only time where they go excruciating detail. Do you remember that, of like how to reload a musket for some reason?
Yeah,
that could have came in handy here.
I want to put out, if anyone has any information on the name Pashal for a matchlock, I could like not find anything. I typed in like Russian matchlocks of like the 16th
Is it just
century.
the Russian word for it?
I think from what I saw, it's either the Russian word for trumpet or flute or some kind of instrument.
There you go. Yeah, I could not find any like weapon with that name.
I want all of Pashal had the sound off. What did we get wrong?
It sounds cool when the guy from 300 says it, though. The Pashal.
I think it's just to give a different name to the exact same weapon, because they have the exact same weapon, and just...
But one reloads faster.
Yeah, I guess because of a bigger hole in the side. So I found someone's school report online, which was hilarious. And I was like, oh, I finally found something that like mentions the Pashal. And they used screenshots from Deadliest Warrior.
Yes.
So I'm hoping they got an A.
I hope that guy watches the show. Hell yeah. Shout out if that's your paper.
We'll have to credit him.
What if somebody's like thesis and they quoted Deadliest Warrior?
It was like shitty screen caps on it too. It was like a literal PowerPoint presentation that looked like a 7th grade kid made it.
Nice. Hell yeah.
So for reference, I just kind of looked up matchlocks that were prevalent in like Europe and Russia during the 16th century. I couldn't really find any information about Russians drilling out any larger holes for quote unquote faster reloads. I don't know if that's true or not. So there's similar to other firearms or gunpowder ignited weapons. Okay, that's just explaining how it fires. I already did that. Also, since they didn't have a stand for this one, they had to use that varnish. In fact,
So I have something to say. I have thoughts on.
I think that should get extra points.
I have a specific question for you because it's brought up a million times, but it seems when they mentioned that the bardiche was used as the stand, I was like, that seems like a Deadliest Warrior fabricated, Deadliest Warrior fabricated thing. Like they were like, wouldn't it be cool if?
Let me scroll down to my bardiche notes here because I was going to mention it. Because I was like, this is a Deadliest Warrior thing. They completely made this up. I'll be damned. In Russia, Lithuania, Ruthenia, and Poland, this weapon was used to rest firearms upon when firing. Factually true.
Craig, anything to say?
Well, mine's more relating to the matchup and the test.
Okay. Well, we can get to that in a second then.
Actually, I'll cover this again too. I'll repeat it. But
so it is not completely fabricated that the bardiche could have been used.
Apparently, I found historical records of it actually being used. And in the 16th century, they were associated with the Russian firearm infantry called Streltsy. They were issued this as a rest for their rifles and as like a close quarters weapon.
Yeah, so that
it is true.
When you missed and the guy closed the distance, you could just pick up the big old axe and chop his head off.
Because at first I was like, this is bullshit. This is just, they forgot a stand for this weapon. So we're like, just use the axe or something.
Yeah.
But no, that is true.
It will color me surprised because as soon as I saw that, I was like, all right, this stinks of Deadliest Warrior.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, now that we got about the Pichal, Vlad tests it against the same test, and he also takes out all 3 targets in 2 shots, but he has a faster reload time
in 2 shots.
Yeah, I think he does it.
Yeah, he does
two.
it.
They both do it in 2.
They both do it in 2.
It's literally the same test. They both hit the first 2 and then reload.
And they both have 1 reload in between.
Oh well, now it's not special.
Yeah, so he has a faster reload time of 34 seconds opposed to, I believe, Jason's 56 seconds.
I believe that is probably a fake reload time, right?
I would guess so too, because they have these guys reloading these matchlocks, and I found myself wondering, like, did they train them on how to reload these things? And so I could definitely see a world where those guys are sticking the whatever that ramrod that you would use to push the bullet down in. I could definitely see a world where they're pushing it into an empty barrel, and then someone who knows what they're doing comes in and actually reloads the weapon and then hands it to them.
69 caliber.
Yeah, and they intercut the footage. So, but you get their point. They then have them both Jason and Vlad fire their respective flintlocks into the opposing warrior's armor. Both weapons pierce the enemy armor, but Vlad and the Pichal deliver a more accurate shot, which Mac eventually brings up the fact that the Pichal has a front sight while the arquebus does not.
That's just a design choice. It's the same gun, essentially.
I feel it definitely, this whole segment sort of, I didn't mind it. I liked it because it's very clear. It's like, okay, these guns are very similar, but one's faster, and because of the front sight, it's slightly more accurate. But like you said, the Pichal is just kind of an arquebus.
Yeah. This is actually my favorite scene in the show, and I got to do it.
Go for it.
I got to bring it up. Let's go back to Pirate vs. Knight for a minute here. And so the matchlock was the predecessor to the flintlock, and predecessor to the blunderbuss that we see featured. And I believe there was a big debate of whether black powder firearms can puncture armor. That is Spanish steel, full thing, punches right through and leaves a dent in the back. Pirate wins, no question.
Yeah.
I told Lucas, don't kick the knight when he's down.
Yeah, that I'm glad you mentioned the Spanish steel, because that is yet another callback to it's a callback to the Hannibal episode of Deadliest Warrior. That's the only other time we see specifically cited Spanish steel. So
that's supposed to be real high quality steel, but black powder punched right through it.
Right. It's almost like that replaced swords and armor. Yeah. So the Pashal is given the edge for its superior accuracy and reload speed. Also, Mac makes way too much of a mention about having that axe available to you. Like it's going to be the game changer in the sim. I would have loved for the end reenactment to come down to they're both like shooting at each other with their little pole arms, and then Vlad just tosses his gun and picks up the Ivan tosses his gun and picks up the axe, and Hernan Cortez is like, and just grabs the support and just gets chopped in half.
Well, there's that part where he talks about the mindset of the warrior as you're reloading your gun and men are surrounding you. Listen, it's not like one guy firing this gun in a field. There's going to be volleys of these things. I don't think there's this mindset of the warrior.
Mac has some hilarious shit in this episode, I must say. He's got some funny quotes.
Oh boy, hopefully no one kills me while I'm reloading.
So let's kick this over to you, Craig. You said you had thoughts about this edge. What do you think?
Well, side note real quick. You know what the axe reminds me of? Is the weapon that the Palace Elites have in Halo 2.
Yes, you're right. Yeah, it does look like that.
And the Brutes later. So,
whoa, mama.
Looks like something from God of War. I imagine one of those is in God of War somewhere throughout the entire
You just wanted to take the attention away from Halo.
Yeah.
But so the edge. So I know I'm on Team Cortez. I'm a, Cortez head. But I'm inspired by Mr. Vladimir Orlov to call balls and strikes. I think it's unfair that we get a mount. Because if you look, the Cortez guy gets a mount for his Aquabus, which I remember seeing that. I was like, why is he shooting it? That's not really fair. And I think they're like, oh, well, because the Vlad guys get it. But that's just an advantage of his kit. Like, it's just a cool little bonus that, oh, this weapon can also be used as a mount.
Yeah.
So for him to get a little thing, I don't think that's fair.
The mount is actually, I was actually just at the museum yesterday, the Royal Ontario Museum. And I saw an arquebus, and the stand was a standard. You would get it with the gun.
You did Cortez research IRL. That's the most research anyone's ever done for any of our episodes.
I just happened to be going, but I did see it, and there were pictures, and every guy using the arquebus in the picture had a stand. So it seemed to be common.
Okay, well, maybe they should have brought it up then. Was it like in a little pouch or something?
The thing where I could go against my own team for a second. It's not like a Russian exclusive release that they got like front sights on theirs too.
Yeah.
I think that's just the models they picked for the show. It's not like
we got some sportsmanship going on.
That's
they
fair.
got the front sight DLC on there.
You got the skin.
So I mean, but for the edge, whatever, it's the same gun.
Yeah,
I
what do you
agree.
think?
Honestly, I agree just with the front, just the front sight and having the axe was like, take the edge,
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I mean, if you have a secondary weapon that's ready to go, and that is a really impressive shot. Like, I love that shot of it just going through the steel.
Yeah,
That's
it is.
sweet.
And
it
it even
was
dented
cool
the
to
back
watch.
of it too.
Yeah.
So aesthetic, right?
Yeah.
Like the dent in the back, and you're like, oh shit.
Oh, they
Wounds.
used their he used his FBI or CIA clay or
Yes,
whatever.
his
too.
FBI ballistic gun.
What's the term they use for like the opening?
Oh, the cavity, the temporary
Temporal.
cavity.
What was that, Walsh?
He said the clay was like calibrated to FBI standards.
Yeah. So after the weapons, based on what we're shown, I guess I agree with the edge. But you guys make completely valid arguments that the front sight could have just been on the arquebus. But moving on, history. We get a small history segment where Professor Andrew tells us about Ivan's Oprichnitsky.
Oh, you know what? I don't mean to interrupt you. You
No, go
actually
for it.
to backtrack a little bit.
Yeah.
I wanted to mention the Cortez rope torture.
Oh yes, please tell us about the masturbation torture.
Yeah. Well, so it's right before this segment, like right before, the Arquebus. And I was like, oh, this is like, his thing. He's known as Cortez the Roper. But I saw like nothing. I looked up rope torture with safe search on.
I was going to say, what websites did you go to?
And so the only thing I found, so I believe in the show they call it a Corte. And what I found was something called, or Corote. I found Corde, which I think is something else, or Strappado,
I think
which is
the G, like Gorote.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't have the subtitles on, but this is something where they would have your arms behind your back and hang you up like this, and they would fuck up your shoulder.
They did that in Vietnam.
Yeah, you can only do it for an hour until you die. I guess, how would you die from that?
No,
Just
a lot of people would pass out just from the pain of it.
Oh, wow.
But I don't know if it would actually kill you.
Yeah.
They said after an hour, you would more than an hour, you would probably die.
Maybe just from exhaustion.
Yeah. I mean, did you see anything from that Walsh, like the rope stuff?
Not the ropes, but there is a recorded. Obviously, there's like lots of like general torture techniques. Lots of like probably knives and stuff. But when they finally captured the last emperor, they kept him alive, and one of the tortures they used on him was they covered his feet in oil and set them on fire.
What the fuck?
Yeah, and he walked with a limp for the rest of his life, I guess, like they said. But I don't know how long that life was. But yeah, that was pretty like it's a pretty brutal one.
No Aztec podiatrist.
Well, Lucas, do you want to tell us a little bit about Ivan the Terrible's Opranichki, his like holy warriors? They would come into towns like the angels of death.
Sure. I don't know where they get that little extra E on the end of it, but I just saw it was called Oprichnich. Okay. It was a designation given to members of Oprichnina, a bodyguard corps established by Ivan the Terrible to govern a division of Russia from 1565 to 1572. Many believed it was Ivan's second wife that had the idea of forming this organization. So members joining had to swear an oath of allegiance, and it is as follows. I swear to be true to the Lord Grand Prince and his realm, to the young Grand Princes and the Grand Princess, and not to maintain silence about any evil that I may know or have heard or may hear, which is being contemplated against the Tsar, his realms, the young princess, or Tsarista. I swear also not to eat or drink with the Zemshchina, and not to have anything in common with them. On this, I kiss the cross. I guess I just joined.
Nice, yeah.
Zemshchina means land as a concept that is opposite to the state of ancient Russia. So any land that's like the opposite opposing to ancient Russia is what that term
Russia's
is.
enemies.
So they all did dress in black garb and carried severed dog heads attached to the saddle. Since there was no such thing as taxidermy back then, they required a constant supply of fresh dog heads. So rip.
Damn.
Yeah, right?
There was actually a picture of that when they were showing them in the
yeah,
or whatever.
they have like fake little doggies on, like dog pelts on.
Yeah.
I just
I hope
assumed
they're fake.
Right. Yeah. I just assumed they were pelts. But,
Nah, that was a thing.
interesting.
There was symbolism behind it. I don't remember what it was. But so they were ordered to execute anyone disloyal to Ivan and use various methods of torture to do so. He also selected 300 of them to be his personal brotherhood and lived with him at the castle to perform the daily ritual executions. There were accounts that said Ivan would sing to them while they ate, and he would only eat once they were done. So during the Novgorod incident I mentioned earlier, it is estimated they killed 1,500 nobles, and they had become a force to be reckoned with, but were disbanded in 1572 by Ivan because he blamed them for the burning of Moscow as their failure in 1571. After this, it became a capital offense to say or discuss the name.
Dang.
So
right.
I joined them, and I'm a criminal now.
Yeah,
in
now
ancient Russia.
now you're a criminal, dude. Come on.
I spoke the name. You are too. You spoke the name,
Yo, Ivan's gonna come after you.
dude.
The ghost of John
Yeah.
the Baptiste. So we go back to weapons. Now we're on to swords, folks. Ivan's blade is the sablia, which looks very much just like a cavalry sword, which we've been seeing a lot of this season. I would like to note that the cavalry sword gets the edge every single time we see it, except for the fucking George Washington episode where the Koli Schmard and that parry, and the same arguments used to give it the edge to the saber in these other episodes are the same arguments they use against it, like in that episode where they're like, yeah, but the Koli Schmard can slash and thrust. And I'm like, give me a fucking
Powered by bald eagles.
do you guys remember in the reenactment when Napoleon was on a horse and he hopped off to go fight George Washington on foot? Very cool. Anyways, I'm not salty about that outcome or anything. The sablia, blade length 32 inches, weight of 2.25 pounds, single bladed, made of steel. Lucas, tell us a little bit about the sablia.
All right. So sablia is a Russian word.
On spring break. Sorry, I didn't hear you.
I said I smoked some sablia.
So sablia is a Russian word. Any guesses what it stands for?
Sword.
Saber. It is just the Russian word for saber. So again, since it's just a generic name, it's hard to pinpoint the exact sword. So I'm just going to look at Russian sabers of the 16th century. This style of sword was brought into Russia around the 12th or 11th or 12th century, and they completely displaced the straight double-edged swords. Rus tribes started creating and producing them around the 12th or 13th century, but only in small quantities as they were expensive. Sabers had become the main sword used by Russians during the era of Ivan the Terrible. One of the most common ones I could find was the shashka, which was the saber that came with no guard. At the time, Poland and Lithuania, who Ivan was fighting constantly at war, used sabers called szabla, which was just Polish word for saber. It wasn't until the 30 Years' War that they became vastly popular in all of Europe, but we'll mention it just because if you type in Ivan the Terrible also, if you type in his sword on Google, there was a 12th century medieval sword found buried under a tree in Novosibirsk, and that's believed to have belonged to Ivan the Terrible, but this is not the sword that he would have been fighting with. This was just part of his personal collection. So if you Google like his sword and you're like, that's not a saber, that's what that is. There was also a recent archaeological dig in which the remains of about 60 buildings were uncovered, which were believed to be armories during the time of Ivan. They found special boxes containing various tools of warfare, such as belts, camp tents, and just weaponry. And it gives us a better sense about how a Russian noble would have prepared for a military campaign. So more of all that story is, he would have had a saber with a guard on it.
Okay.
I'd like to say, whenever you said that Polish word, Brendan made a face like he just stepped in some dog dookie. Brendan, do you want to share something?
It's Shabla. The SZ is pronounced like an SH.
Yeah.
There you go.
Polish is tough.
What is it, Brendan?
Shabla.
Shabla.
Polish is tough.
That's at. Never mind. Okay, continue.
So they introduced the other sword, or at least I will right now, and that is the Espada Ropera. Blade length of 35.5 inches, so a little bit longer, weight of 2.75 pounds, weighs a little bit more, double-edged, and made of Spanish steel. So, call back to the Hannibal episode, of course. Craig, tell us a little bit about the Espada Ropera. Is it real, or is it just from Dark Souls?
Well, you kind of stepped on my toes a little bit there. I was going to say, I checked every video game and I did not see one example of the Espada Ropera. No, whenever you look up Dark Souls just consumes the Google search for the Espada Ropera, and not even because it's a fake name, but because Dark Souls is just so powerful. Another fun fact: a lot of Mr. Zero Crocodile's attacks in One Piece are named after it. Like Desert Spada is one of his iconic moves.
Interesting.
Which is,
what does Espada Ropera mean? Did you look that up?
Spanish dress sword.
Ooh,
thank you, saved me.
Fancy lad sword.
Right.
Okay.
Brendan, can you maybe give the people a little taste of, if they want to make a build around the Espada Ropera and Dark Souls, what would they do?
Don't.
I saw. I read the. Why was it bad?
It's just very short. I actually did PvP build with it, and I couldn't hit anybody because it was too short.
Oh, it's too short, Craig. It'd probably be good for you then.
Hey,
You're like, this will come in handy one day when I do a podcast with Deadliest Warrior. I did see the build said that you should combine. There's like a dirk that's a natural
Yep.
complement to it.
Well, did Hernan Cortez use this sword? Was it?
we're talking like Dark Souls.
Was I know? Was it a particular sword of the time?
So I actually do have notes of that. So, what's that?
it was like the most common sword. Like that's why it was called like the dress sword. Like everybody had.
Yeah, it's basically just a rapier, and you guys know what a rapier is. It's characterized by a long, thin blade with a rounded hilt to protect the hand. Bless you. There's not a strong connection on Hernan Cortez. Like, there's not like, oh, this is, he was always using that spot. Like, but this is just what he almost certainly would have used.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's just like kind of like how the arquebus is just the standard. What do you call it? Standard
like
equipment for the
matchlock.
military. Standard equipment that they would be
Yeah.
given.
Okay.
And it's cool. Like, it is still a rapier, but this, if you're going to get a weapon for him, it's going to be this. And it's cool to have some representation of it on the show. So I don't know what else you would have picked for
And it
this
does
category.
it does allow them to create the dynamic that they do a couple different times on this show, starting with Sun Tzu versus Vlad and continuing throughout season 3 of like this double-edged sword that can parry and thrust against this cavalry saber, which is just massive and, chops your head off or whatever.
Let me be clear here. Single-edged swords are the reason double-edged swords don't exist anymore.
So, before we get the test, we get to see Dave Baker crafting both swords in his forge, which it is revealed to us, I don't know if it has been before, is underneath the Fight Club. They say it's located directly underneath.
I like to think there's like a secret elevator entrance that's like, and we're entering the Dave Baker Weapons Lab, and then like they pull a book. And just,
I like to think that while they're filming the show, Dave has to live down there. He just has like a cot in the corner, and
There's a forge going, and there's massive things of heat. It's like 150 degrees down there.
yeah, he doesn't shower for like 3 months straight. He's just by the end of filming, he's just covered in soot from head to toe, and he reeks.
look, this is Dave Baker. Look, he's got the tools for making the weapons.
Oh, yeah.
That's him down the thing.
Classic Ivan fan.
I think you guys mentioned this in the previous episode this season, but they should release a companion episode with just like 40 minutes of Dave Baker making these weapons.
Yeah.
They kind of did with that web series, The Armory, that we talked about in the last one. Oh, I guess it's not out yet. So on top of the web series for the Aftermath, there was apparently another web series that's lost where they would look at 2 weapons. Yeah. From each episode called The Armory, which Dave Baker was on. So they kind of did that, but I get what you're saying.
No, I like to. I mean, he's obviously knew what he was talking about from the small clips that you get. So it's just interesting.
Maybe this is why the true successor show to Deadliest Warrior became Forged in Fire. Maybe
Everyone just
saw, like-
needed more Dave Baker.
Yep.
I heard in Deadliest Warrior Legends, there's a little secret part in the Fight Club where you could take an elevator down to Dave Baker's studio.
He's the final boss.
Yeah.
So
He's like
And you unlock him.
every weapon. He's like Master Hand. He's like GTA pulls out every weapon ever on the show.
He's wearing like 15 things of armor.
every single type.
He adapts the situation. He just pulls a piece of metal. And he has like a new weapon.
So both swords are tested against an unarmored static pig target, and then from horseback against an armored target. So we see the strengths and weaknesses of both a slashing and a thrusting weapon. The Espada Ropera performs a little bit better. I say better. It's a little flashier on foot in that Jason is able to cut the pig completely in half and deliver an impressive thrust that sort of just sticks in the pig, which was pretty funny. Everybody got a big hoot out of that one. And then Vlad with the Sablia, he does pretty good against the pig, but he admits, this is his integrity. This is not a thrusting weapon, and it feels uncomfortable to thrust it as opposed to just slashing.
Good guy, Vlad.
They hop on horseback. And it's interesting that they armored up the targets.
Before they get the horseback, I just want to say we get some of the most grotesque innard shots of the pigs we've seen on the show yet. And they focus on it.
Bulging.
Yeah. They're like sticking the camera down. It's like cut off head, and you're like, oh yeah, that's a good shot right there. Let's put that on TV.
You'd be fucking dead. All right.
Yeah.
So
look at this fucked up pig.
I guess they put the armor on these mannequins in the horse test to test like accuracy of like hitting a spot that is unarmored. And Vlad, he couldn't have delivered a better shot. It's right clean down the middle of the face. Dorian gives a pretty epic description where he's like, this guy would have opened his mouth screaming as his head just gets severed from his body. Pretty sick. And then Jason, for some reason, does a thrust from horseback. I feel like
and that loses the matchup.
So he does a thrust from horseback, and it shows he doesn't deliver a great strike. It does pierce the chainmail and go into like the collar area a little bit.
Thrusting from horseback with swords is a very dangerous activity if it gets stuck.
So he gets asked, why did you thrust as opposed to slash? And he says, well, a thrust is, more deadly. And it's interesting. This is a situation where I cannot tell if maybe Jason just made like a genuine miscalculation, like he just thought like, well, I'll thrust. Or was he told to thrust to create a greater contrast between these two swords so they could give the edge to the Sablia and it be very, very clean edge? Because, the Espada performs better on foot in that it's more flashy. It's. I would say that the hosts like freak out way more at the Espada and the on foot test, but the Sablia is more impressive. Puts on a more impressive show from the horseback
test.
It's
literally a cavalry saber. It's what it's designed to do.
I do wonder if the Espada Ropera, if he had gone for the slash, would that not have just been able to cut right through the mannequin's head as well?
Did you write down what Jeff said about the Ropero?
No, what did he say?
2 inches can make all the difference.
Oh yeah,
I missed a dick joke. Damn it!
I haven't written down. Forgot to mention it. Yeah.
There was also something else in the pig test that I thought was really funny. Jason says, well, they're examining the pig, and Jason says, what I love about this is nobody gives straight swords enough credit for cutting. That's bull. It cut right through the pig. And all I could think was, like, this dude definitely lost his prom date. So a dude with a curved sword.
At sword school.
You versus the dude she tells you not to worry about.
You versus the sword she tells you not to worry about. It's kind of it reminds me of our talk in some episodes where it's like 5 inches more than enough. All right, you don't need any more than that.
Normally I don't care about the results. I got some shit to say about this.
Yeah, go ahead, Craig. Hit it.
First off, I think this edge is bullshit.
Oh
yeah. So the only reason that we lost is because the guy on horseback decided to stab. If that didn't happen, it'd be totally different. And then Mac is on one. First, he says on the horseback test, because they're testing, like they're wearing armor, and he says, if you hit someone where they don't have armor, you don't have to worry about their armor. So I'm like, thanks, Mac.
Can I say real quick, Craig, the experts do end up giving the edge to the Sablia. They go back and forth on the swords. Dorian chooses the Espada.
Comes out the gate.
Dorian chooses the Espada Repara due to it being a thrusting weapon. That does seem to be just a Dorian shtick. He loves thrusting weapons on this show. He just thinks they're deadlier. They go better through armor. Mac picks the Sablia, from what you were saying,
so stupid,
for the simplicity of having one technique. And he
loves that line.
He is so on when he says it multiple times during this whole sword thing where he's like, and he gets the Mac voice going where he's like, and if I'm in battle under stress, I want to have one technique that I can do really, really well. And then
They act like these
break-
are like trained soldiers.
Jeff breaks the tie, picking the Sablia due to it being superior on horseback, and saying like, hey, it's better on horseback. Most of the fighting's going to be done from horseback. That's more important. So my only notes on the Edge are it's too bad the Espada Ropera didn't have a parrying technique like the Kolish Mard. Thoughts? Craig, back to you.
So, like, that Matt comment is so dumb. It's like loser talk I would expect from season 1 from like a team to be like, I'd actually rather have less options so I don't have to think about it. Like, in what other context does that make any fucking sense? Like, if you are so paralyzed by your choice between thrusting and stabbing or whatever, that's a you problem. Like,
Maybe you should be on the battlefield.
yeah, it's like, when would you rather have less options on the battlefield because you're too much of a Neanderthal to be like, I don't know, A or B.
And it's not coming to me immediately, but like there has definitely been times on this show, if not Mac himself mentioning like, and that gives you options, and options are key, you know, like,
Yeah.
I could definitely see an argument being made the other way where they're like, you can slash or you can thrust. It's got both.
You know what? I'm going to give Mac a pass here, rest his soul, because I bet he was told to be the guy, like, come up with be the, you know.
Well, you said, Craig, you're like, we would have gotten the Edge if he hadn't thrusted, and it's like, I think you got it. The key with this show is to understand, like, it's the other way around. Like, they told him to do the stab.
Right.
Well, here's my theory of why he thrusted, the more dangerous activity, than slashed. So we just witnessed, the other one cut clean through the head falls off. Whenever you look at the Russian armor, it has chainmail down around the sides of the neck, so he would not have been able to get that clean slash through the head like the last one. So in his mind, my theory is I'm not going to be able to cut the head off, so my test isn't going to look as good. So my best theory or my best method will be to pierce through the chainmail armor, and he just did a really shitty shot at it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, that was my reasoning, because he wasn't going to get that clean cut through the head, because you can't slash through chainmail. You can only pierce it.
So, Craig, you disagree. You would have preferred to see the Espada Ropera get the Edge?
Yeah, there's just
It's bullshit.
stuff.
Yeah.
Lucas?
I agree with the Edge. From here, for me, it's just the pure fact.
That.
Yeah, well, it's my team, but throughout history, single-edged swords have completely replaced double-edged swords for the most part due to superior cutting ability, which is more combat effective from horseback, because most of the time these people are fighting from horseback. That's why in modern times you only see military outfits with single-edged sabers. The double-edged swords are prone to a slight sense of danger to the user, and curved blades are regarded as a newer design and easier to draw, and the human arm moves in circular motions, which makes them easier to swing, and the weights but usually better distributed onto the blade. Yeah.
Okay. Walsh, thoughts?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't really know much about that. That's interesting that most swords eventually just evolved into curve, but most of this fighting in the sim wasn't really on horseback, so
Right. Yeah. How many exactly? Like, how many guys are on horse versus how many
they
are
had
on foot?
how many horses did they walked in? There was like one horse and 4
Yeah.
people.
This is actually a weird sim. They have 2 horses per team on this sim.
Yeah.
It's different from
Hannibal's coming in on an elephant, but then he doesn't ride the elephant. He gets off it. You know?
Yeah.
Mac definitely died on that hill. I don't know why he decided that was his argument, but he
loved
said
it.
it once and he was like, "I'm just gonna run with this."
Yeah.
But yeah, we not to spoil it or anything, but I'll give them this one because
Yeah, hell yeah.
they can have the first half. We
Don't
get the
worry.
final score.
The biggest fucking of the show is coming.
So I agree with the Edge for whatever that's worth. I'm not a sword expert. I always pick the cavalry sabers on here.
There's a reoccurring shot that we see right at the end of this section too. It's probably not the first time you see it, but I did write a timestamp of 28 minutes, 20 seconds. It's that shot when the conquistadors are going to execute an Aztec laying on the ground, and it's the most terrible B-roll shot where he just misses.
What the hell?
my
It's like
Yeah,
10
yeah.
feet away from his head.
God, where they swing that axe.
Yeah,
and
they show it like
it's-
10 times.
It's so clearly not hitting his head, and they play it every 2 fucking seconds. Thank you.
Yeah, as
Oh
soon as I
my
saw it like the third time, I was like, why do you keep showing that stupid shot?
I was like, yeah, this looks really good. Get it out of here. Yeah. So with the Sablia getting the edge, we move on to mid-range weapons. We have the Bardiche, which was the axe mentioned earlier. Ivan's axe, blade length of 28 inches, overall length of 6 feet, and a weight of 9 pounds. Vlad dismembers the ballistic gel torso with the Bardiche, however, fails to penetrate the steel plate or dismount the dummy that is on horseback. So this shows that the steel plate will hold up against the Bardiche. And Vlad is also very honest when they ask him about fatigue. They love their fatigue on here. And Vlad is honest and says, look, this weapon is heavy. It's big. When you're doing these big swings, it'll tire you out. So, Lucas, do you want to tell us a little bit about the Bardiche?
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, I got some exciting news. I Googled a weapon, and this one actually had some search results.
Nice.
It wasn't just a generic name.
Yeah, Deadliest Warrior Wiki, the Wiki curse.
So this was a type of polearm used from the 14th to 17th century in Europe. It's descended from the medieval Sparth or Danish axe. It differs from the halberd, having neither a hook on the back nor a spear point at the top. So during the 16th century, they became the weapon, again, this is what I covered earlier, that was associated with the Russian firearm infantry, the Streltsy.
Nailed it.
When you look them up, their commander is listed as Ivan the Terrible. Funny enough, their main weapon is listed as the arquebus. Fun fact. So there's some good models of them on display in some European museums. There was a ton of them. The blade is usually varied in shape, but it was most often a long cleaver type blade. And as we covered, they were used as rests for firearms. So it's a good weapon choice for this episode. Since we touched on the test already, I get why they have Vlad swinging this thing sideways at a first try to cut off the neck, but that is not going to be the most efficient way to swing this thing. You're carrying most of the weight yourself. This would be used in a downward vertical swing, which he swishes to, which carries the weight onto the enemy instead.
It's like a sledgehammer. You want to let the weight of the head.
You don't want to be holding it up sideways.
Yeah, and trying to
He eventually switches that. He cuts off the head, obliterates the dummy. It's a blade with a bunch of weight behind it. It's not that surprising. I get that they're testing armor, but that would not be the target with this weapon on horseback. They're more commonly used on the horse to take out the animal instead of the rider.
Yeah, okay.
I was gonna say it doesn't seem like a dismounting weapon really, but they claimed that they were like, the people of Europe, it was just cavalry battles, so they needed a great dismounting weapon, and then his guy just dents his plate, and then I was like, well, he didn't really dismount him very well, so it's obviously not that great.
Yeah, because doesn't have that thrusting point, so it wouldn't usually be used on the rider. I gotta say,
the horse, it would do damage.
Yeah, the slow-mo swing, like the first swing that they play in slow-mo, looks nasty.
I also wanted to say something about this. This also kind of comes down to I would think training. A soldier trained on this weapon would understand how to use it efficiently and not tire himself out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So having just a random dude swing it around, he probably doesn't really understand how to use the weight to carry it and have it swing through and it looks like like an amateur, I guess. That's
a great point, Walsh. I was thinking about that when watching this. Is has Vlad ever held one of these things before? Because he seems like he looks like a pretty in shape guy, and he's tired out after a minute with this thing, or
and it said it was only 9.5 pounds.
And I was like, is he? But you think about it, if you're on Deadliest Warrior and you have 10 seconds to cut up the gel, you are giving everything you got into this thing. But yeah, I was wondering that too, Walsh, is someone who's been conditioned with this or trained with it. If soldiers are fighting with this on a battlefield for hours at a time or something, are all the guys, you figured it wouldn't have stuck around that long if everybody's getting exhausted swinging this thing around.
3 centuries.
Yeah.
Dorian says at the end, after 2 or 3 swings, they wouldn't be able to swing it anymore. They'd be too tired out. I'm like, dude, these are literally trained warriors who train with this weapon. I'm sure they'd be continue to find swinging it. This isn't one in the chamber from Black Ops. You get one shot, and that's it. The whole battle, everyone only gets 3 swings. You either kill someone, but once everyone's done with their 3 swings, battle's over.
Yeah.
And the Sablias come out.
Sablia. All right. Well, then we get introduced to the alabarda with a head length of 30 inches, overall length of 8 feet, and a weight of 6.25 pounds. So a much longer and lighter weapon. It cites that it's made of oak and steel. Craig, do you want to tell us a little bit about the alabarda?
Yeah, not much. My first note was that it appears to be extremely Spanish, and that Googling it gave me Wikipedia Espanol,
Nice.
which led me to conclude this is basically just a Spanish halberd. Like, I think this might be the Spanish word for halberd.
That was my question for you.
It literally translates to halberd, yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I couldn't find a lot of unique characteristics of Spanish halberds compared to other cultures. So, I'm not fruitful.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just a halberd.
It seems very similar to the other halberds we've seen, like the knight's pole axe and Vlad the Impaler's halberd and stuff like that. Jason tests it. Same test. It's against a static ballistic gel and then a basically crash test dummy on top of a horse. And he is wearing the chainmail armor of Ivan. And Jason successfully decapitates the ballistic gel dummy and then succeeds in penetrating Ivan's chainmail and also dismounting the dummy from horseback. So
He gets the thing snagged on it.
yeah,
What does Jeff say after that, Craig?
Do I have it written down?
You don't remember what Jeff says right after he stabs it?
No, what does he say?
A little coup de grace.
Oh, yeah. Does he say coup de grace?
He says he's like, well, that's a coup de grace.
Oh, yeah. Well,
the coup de grace.
yeah, we were talking about that like we ironically would say coup de grace, but I've now become that, and that's all it is in my head. But I probably to other people say coup de grace.
You said it in a previous episode. Everyone just started dying. It's funny.
Yeah, it's funner to say. I don't even realize like that I'm doing it.
Where did that come from?
It's a funny misnomer.
Was that Gears of War?
So it's obviously a phrase. I know that Hercule in Dragon Ball Z Budokai, that's what he says when he does one of his kicks.
I think that was like a medal in like Gears 3. I remember getting quoted.
I think independent of that though, we made a joke about coup de grace. So
whatever. I just always every time I see it, I say coup de grace as well.
yeah.
So Mac is in love with the alabarda. He quotes Occam's razor saying, he goes, "It is vain to do with more what can be done with less," in reference to the alabarda being able to do more damage with less work than the bardiche. And this also plays into the Ranger North Korean episode where Mac plays a part in giving the edge to the AKM over the M4 because Tim Kennedy empties his entire mag, which we discussed that in that episode, but it reminded me of that as Mac being like, was Max citing Occam's razor in that episode?
Wait, did he do that in defense of it or no? Or
in defense of the alabarda?
No, I'm talking about the other episode.
Oh no, he did it like saying the M4. He took more shots than the AK.
Oh, okay.
So So it was the same line of logic that he's using.
He was
here.
supporting North Koreans.
Right. Yeah.
Confirmed.
So the hosts give the edge to the alabarda because
don't forget about the X factor they throw in there. It's
I
really
wrote
important.
that. Yeah.
Well, what X factor do they throw in?
Domination.
Yeah. Jeff says domination is one of our X factors in this sim. What the fuck?
Yeah, can
is
someone
that?
please fucking explain what domination is as an X factor?
I'm gonna temper the steel here for a minute because we are one section away from X factors, and I have domination listed on there. So I want to
because then don't they discuss domination specifically?
They do.
I just get so tired of every 5 seconds in this season. That's an X Factor. That's
I was like, how many X Factors can there be?
Yeah.
He can sneeze at any moment. That's an X Factor.
It's called.
So
It's an X Factor called sneeze.
this is why I want to finish the weapon before we open this can of worms, because I know that the X Factor section is going to be a shit show, as it always is on this podcast.
Hey, Doc, heads up.
The hosts give the edge to the alabarda because it causes less fatigue in the man and successfully penetrates the chainmail. There's also a quick armor segment where they give the edge to Cortez's armor for being more effective against melee weapons than the chainmail.
They glance over that. Shouldn't
Yeah,
they like,
it's like 2
explain
seconds.
what the armor is or anything?
I feel like they do that a lot with armor. It's always like an afterthought when it maybe
So
should be everything.
I noticed, he's got steel plate, Cortez does, and then Ivan the Terrible's armor is very similar to Vlad the Impaler's armor. It's like the same thing.
Yeah,
So,
I have some short notes on it real quick.
if you want to give us some notes on the armor. Also, I'd like to get you guys' thoughts on the edge going to the alabarda and the edge going to Cortez's armor.
I say as panelist packed, if we can maybe skip over that so we can get to the X Factors faster. Does anyone have anything pressing to say?
I'll just say I agree with the edge because multiple times I've argued that the halberd is essentially one of the greatest weapons in military history, in my opinion.
I would agree with the edge on both counts. I think steel plate and the alabarda, no brainer. That spike on the end of the alabarda looks fucking, to quote Lucas, nasty.
Yeah. I mean, that spike literally was to like
And
pierce
then just like a
chainmail.
little fun fact, like I believe the arquebus was paired with the halberd to create the formation of pike and shot, which is a very popular formation for quite a long time.
Badass. I wonder if that was an X factor they put in the sim. The pike and shot.
I bet it was. No, they're too busy putting sneezing in there.
You want to give us your notes on Ivan the Terrible's armor, Lucas?
Yeah, I just had some just a little interesting thing here. I did find that Ivan the Terrible's helmet is on display at the Royal Armory in Stockholm, Sweden, and it's forged steel. You could see pictures of it online. What I could find online regarding 16th century Russian armor, the show is not too far off. Many would have had more steel plating that cover more vital spots on the body. There was also variants that use steel scales. Overall, the show's representation is not terrible.
Unlike Ivan himself.
Ooh. Let me go. Oh, and then just the armor. They skip over this armor section so quick, and they just give it to Cortez right away, which I understand. But here's my little counter argument. Both of their armors were ineffective against firearms, and both armors can be hit around with other weapons. I guess there's a case to be made, but this is a stupid category. They just need to give something to Cortez.
Instead of even, they just say nobody because apparently useless.
I do want to say, so I agree with the edge. Before we go past this part, before we get into the X Factors, Ivan the Terrible has the edge in the most effective weapon in this entire matchup and has it in the sword category as well. So there's no way in this completely made up BS sim that they didn't max out Cortez's armor stat.
What was his metallurgy and
Logistics.
I thought they
logistics?
would have given Ivan like more ornate armor. I thought it was like kind of ugly for.
Yeah, I did make a note about that too. I feel like he would have been wearing, something a little fancier than that. He was,
It was
like
like
literally
dented
the leader
plates.
of the.
It was like dented plates zip tied to a chainmail.
I want to know, what was Ivan the Terrible's calm under fire stat?
Max, like, you never know when you're going to get the sniffles in the middle of a battlefield. That's why. Sneezing.
They often fought in the morning, and it was very damp and cold.
Yeah.
Seasonal allergies. What season are they fighting in?
These Torians, like, it's a very temperate climate in Russia. Whenever you get a rapid change in temperature, that is going to give you the sniffles, and that's why we gave Ivan a 35 in sneezing to Cortez's 382.
Speaking of a 35 in sniffles, let's get to the X Factors, gentlemen.
I don't remember why I didn't like this season.
Let's just take
I kind of love the X Factors.
let's just take these through
It's always something to laugh at.
one at a mole fucking time. All right, so the two X Factors that are shown in the X Factor segment, because we only get 2 out of 5 that are actually shown in the segment itself. They discuss psychological health, where they give Cortez a 72 and Ivan a 37.
It's probably the lowest X Factor score.
That's what I said. I wonder if this is the lowest.
So it's not, because we're also recording Saddam Pol Pot this week, and I believe Pol Pot and Saddam both get lower psychological health scores than that.
Dang.
So yeah, I think so. I know at least Pol Pot does.
I
What
just
do you have
have
to
one
do to get
note
zero?
on the psychological health. This is in favor of Cortez. This is actually a quote directly from Cortez.
By a lot, yeah.
But this is a quote directly by him. He says, "I and my companions suffer from a disease of the heart, which can be cured only by gold." So obviously he had a heart disease, not mental health.
Hell yeah.
But that is a real quote from him. So I thought that was interesting.
It's like a Drake lyric.
So yeah, this is a Drake.
It is.
So does anyone have any thoughts on the psychological health X Factor? Because this basically is what decides the matchup, essentially.
I mean, I think it's the least offensive out of the other ones that we see, but
Yeah.
I think it's the most offensive out of all the
Someone
ones
might
that we're going to
disagree.
see. All right, I've said this before. Ivan had a temper and mood swings. It was a little bit crazy. What is a 37 though? That's like someone who can't even comprehend what's going on the battlefield.
Lucas is like, no one's perfect.
Yeah. I'm thinking he should be like a 50, like a 37. Come on.
Well, also we get back to, we don't know what these scales even
How
are.
weighted is this stat too? Because as I said, Ivan is completely leading, like
Well,
going into this pretty much.
According to Jeff, a couple aftermaths before this, the X Factor accounts for about 20% of the outcome.
Yeah,
of what he
my
made.
ass.
Which, of course, he had to clean the shit off of that before he showed it on camera from pulling it out his ass. 'Cause
What does that mean?
makes
How does it affect 20%? What does that mean?
It's like,
The X Factor's getting any kills?
I don't fucking know.
but in this episode, they're everything. They make all the difference. So,
I can't wait till the aftermath. Oh my God.
so it is the aftermath. I can't even. I'm laughing thinking about it. It's a very Robert Daly heavy aftermath.
It needs the dum.
So
It's like clown music.
the other X Factor they discuss here is domination.
Fuck you, Robert.
They give Cortez an 85 and Ivan a 78. So Cortez wins in domination.
I mean, I get what does domination really mean?
What is that?
Like, I guess Cortez dominated a population of Stone Age warriors.
Yeah, he wiped out a native population because he had guns. Ooh, he's so dominant.
But also, he's not fighting them.
Yeah.
So what the fuck does
smallpox dominated them? So like, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, we'll get to smallpox when we get to the aftermath.
Is it domination? Isn't that what we're trying to find out on the show?
Yeah.
Who is more dominant?
Yeah.
Isn't that the goal? How do you weigh
Yeah.
the end result of the show before the end of the show?
It is interesting the way they word some of these. Like what? So we have a separate X Factor that's not shown in the segment, but it is shown during the results, called physicality, where Ivan gets an 84 and Cortez gets a 69. Nice. And I think that this is due to, the height and weight difference, physicality. But when I saw domination, that's what I initially thought is who's like physically bigger, like can push the other one around. But then they
Like
have
presence.
Then they have physicality, and it's like, what does domination mean?
I mean, my only thing I can guess is like it's dominatrix, and since he like tying ropes around people's necks.
Yeah.
The guy's getting people off with the rope torture.
Hernan is
yeah.
definitely a dom.
Yeah, yes.
But I don't know if you're going to bring this up. We get no max battle board.
Yes.
And I was thinking about this. There's a couple theories. One, the check didn't clear with the people for the touch table.
touch table.
Or two,
The Dutch table. Such an awful name.
right? Maybe it could be that Hernan Cortez didn't have any notable battles that weren't like colonizing a group of indigenous people.
Right.
And what Ivan did wasn't great either. So they couldn't be like, look what he did to these poor people.
Genius.
Yeah, maybe it was just a little bit. Because I haven't watched it yet. They probably don't do that with the Saddam Hussein episode.
They do not, no.
So yeah, that might be why. But
So we covered psychological health, domination, physicality. So far, the first two going in favor of Cortez. psychological health very heavily in favor of Cortez. Ivan getting a pretty big boost in physicality, 84 to 69. Then another one that's not discussed in the segment but is shown during the results is generalship. And when you hear them talk about it after we get the results and in the aftermath, generalship seems to play like the biggest role. And I have to think that psychological health played hand in hand with generalship, at least the way they talk about it. So Cortez gets the edge with a 76 versus Ivan's 54.
That's low.
So Ivan with a big fat F in both psychological health and generalship. So kind of interesting. Now, if you were already confused about the domination stat, let me tell you that there is a fifth factor that's not shown in the episode but is listed online, and that is intimidation. Ivan gets a
Online exclusive.
Yeah, Ivan gets a 90 to Cortez's 82.
How does that make sense? How is he inefficient in battle and stupid in the head, but he gets a 90 in
How
intimidation?
does he lose in domination but win in intimidation?
We also don't know what he looked like. Like, and also, like, isn't that a big part of intimidation? Or, yeah, like,
No, it's just because of his rep. You know, he was known for doing
guess.
bad things.
They tried to bring that up in the Bardiche test. One of the PhD guys, like, imagine a field of 1,000 of these. That's intimidation.
Yeah.
that's the X factor we include in our sim.
I'd like to point it out because much like getting like in the 50s or below, getting a 90 is really high. I think this ties the North Koreans. The North Koreans got a 90 in extremism, I think, which was the highest we had seen so far. I know. And then Ivan gets a 90 in intimidation. So we see very few 90s handed out. So
I have a lot of min-maxing for his stats.
yes, Ivan
Yeah.
definitely playing.
Dumped all of his points and
Definitely playing a melee build, all strength and endurance, one intelligence. So, what do we think about these X Factors, guys? I mean, anything more to
Fuck
add?
them.
Fuck them.
stupid.
What do you think, Walsh?
I mean, I think we touched on it pretty good. Like,
Yeah.
This is me when I know it's not for the X factors.
Here's the thing. Here's what
Generalship, I guess I would agree with. Like, Lucas couldn't like find any like there were no battles that he could say Ivan the Terrible was at or commanded, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, he was more of just the leader of the country and just directed the armies.
But that was just kind of like handed to him too, wasn't it? Like,
I could be wrong. Post in the comments if you know a battle he was directly involved
Well,
in.
here's the thing. My thoughts on this are I don't mind that an X Factor like this decides the outcome. I sort of hate it because the X Factor goes by so quick. Like the X Factor segment is like a fucking minute long. I remember trying to write down the numbers while I was watching the episode, and I kept having to rewind and pause because as soon as it would pop up, it would disappear, and I'd have to like the number would disappear.
That's why it bugs me that it doesn't determine it, because it just null and voids most of the episode.
Yeah, so we spend this entire episode talking about how these guys are brutal mass murderers, maniacs. We test their weapons, and then we get this 1 minute X Factor segment where they basically bring up something that they have not touched for the entire episode, which is, well, Cortez is a better commander, basically. Like he's smarter and a better tactician. And that's what ends up winning. And when we get to the aftermath, we'll see that even more. I don't want to steal any specifics from Craig's aftermath corner. But it feels like a little bit of a leg sweep, like a little bit of a bait and switch for the purpose of being a bait and switch. Like, I think you are intended to go into this reenactment thinking Ivan is going to get this. And then it's supposed to be a boom, big reveal, you know, we give the weapons are always what matters on the show. Psych. This time, the X Factor warrior is going to decide it. And they did that in the Saddam Pol Pot episode as well, where the guy who is seen as having the better mental health out of the two maniacs is the one that wins. And I'd love to point out that the Saddam Pol Pot win is the biggest landslide of season 3. This is the second biggest landslide of season 3. So it seemed in the writer's room when they're setting up these narratives of these who's going to fight and which one's going to win, so long as one of them's not American, they actually have to come up with an argument. And they're like, well, who would win between Ivan and Hernan? And it's like, let's give Ivan the advantage in like weapons, but you know what? We did Lawrence of Arabia pretty dirty, giving him all the X factors and having him lose. Let's give Hernan Cortez the win. So it feels like a little bit of a rug pull. I don't totally disagree. I feel like Hernan does have more experience commanding troops in the actual field, plus especially, because this is always important to remember, this is a small scale battle. This is 5-on-5, and we're assuming it's one hero character and 4 subordinates. Cortez, you talk about leading small groups of men before he upgrades to the larger. So I feel like the way they're presenting it is that Ivan's a maniac who's going to come charging in there, and Hernan is actually going to be calculating and be able to command his men around, which I don't know enough about either of these guys really to make a judgment call on that. But I don't mind the argument itself. I did feel like it was a bit of a fucking rug pull at the very end where they're like, yeah, but tactics. Anyways, going to the reenactment, like we're going to spend basically 40 minutes talking about their weapons, which Ivan is going to get the edge on what you would think might be the more important ones. And then, yeah, but what about the X factors?
The fix is in.
I love that line. The fix is in, people.
We do get a great clip in the small short X Factor section that I sent you guys right before we started recording, of Mac just smiling and just nodding like, damn, that's crazy, bro. Wow.
Daily talk.
Well, Robert's just talking about nothing.
That's crazy.
Bro.
That's crazy.
So speaking of the reenactment, I'm going to kick it over to the Sim Grandmaster here in a second.
Corner.
But
It's Grandmaster Jim.
So before I kick it over to Lucas, I want to add, when you're watching this reenactment, that Brian Forrest, who was an expert on the Hannibal episode, features here as a conquistador. J.W. Wiseman from the Jesse James episode is listed as a stunt actor for horseback riding on this episode. Makes me wonder if he does that regularly for the show, probably. J.W. Wiseman.
J.W. Wiseman.
J.W. Wiseman.
The cherry on top, Persian immortal expert Ardashir Radpour stars as Hernan Cortez himself. So if you remember from the Persian Immortal episode, Ardashir is probably the most prolific stunt actor they've had on the show.
He's the guy on the Aftermath?
He's in everything. He's in The Mandalorian. He's in everything you've ever seen. All the Marvel shit, all the Star Wars stuff. Like, his IMDb is massive.
Is he in any of the Jurassic Worlds?
Probably. I don't know.
Dang,
I don't know.
That makes him someone.
I don't know.
He played the
off top of my
Raptor.
head. But yeah, so he is here playing Hernan Cortez. So, Lucas, do you want to take us to take go to you.
I would love to. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Sim. I am your Grand Sim Master Lucas, and I'll be taking you back to a 16th-ish century battlefield where we have the Battle of the Butchers. Ivan the Terrible, slaughterer of Europe and a lot of his own people, and Hernan Cortez, slaughterer of 250,000 innocent natives of Mexico and some of his own people.
Damn.
Two great upstanding fellows.
Damn.
If everyone's ready, drink a little mercury for me and hang on to your gold and get ready to press those enter buttons.
having my Mercury freak out.
This is the Enter Bunning corner.
We open up on Ivan, looking up to God as the sound of a man taking a massive shit is in the background. We soon find out it's Ivan's prisoner. He gives the camera a smile as he goes to approach the guy. But off in the distance, and about 20 feet away, we see Hernan Cortez is riding on horseback with his band of men, his jolly band of men. He halts his horse as he spots Ivan. We cut back to Ivan as he gives the man on horseback a nod. The horse starts moving forward, pulling on his prisoner, while his men laugh at him. Cortez's men start getting into place for battle. And he is laughing a mighty laugh. Ivan is, when he looks up and notices one of the Spanish men is aiming a matchlock at him. Cortez tells his man to fire. And honestly, kind of a baller move. Ivan pulls one of his men right in front of him to take the bullet.
That's really funny.
That's his bipolar side. Yeah. So bipolar is when you have your friends that die for you.
Fuego.
Anyone can die for me, but would you live for me?
Shout out Cesar Romero.
So, Ivan is thrown to the ground, but he has plenty of time to get back up and get to the horse from his man while the Spanish team starts their 23-minute reload. Meanwhile, one of Ivan's guys sets his axe down and takes aim with the matchlock. Cortez's man is almost done with his reload. He's about to be back in the action, but he takes a round from Ivan's guy. Damn, he was so close.
Doesn't the steel plate stop it, though?
I don't remember.
No, I was setting you up for one.
If it did, I was about to make it up. Ivan then draws his saber and starts charging on horse, ripping the prisoner in half on the way, and we get that sick CGI blood trail. Cortez's men start to scatter, and one grabs his polearm as another continues jerking off his matchlock. Ivan then slices one of the men down with a saber and starts riding off after the other who is fleeing. Ivan cuts him down also with a saber. Cortez is not happy because it's 4v2.
JWY.
Jebediah. Ivan's other man is on another horse because this is the sim where each team gets 2 horses. Which totally threw me off for a second, honestly, because Cortez pulls him off with the polearm and kills him on the ground. And for a second, I thought that was Ivan, but it was not. So Ivan's guy gets kicked off the horse. Oh, no. Yeah. Hold on. Yeah. Ivan, on his horse, comes rushing after to slice down Cortez, the other guy. What the fuck happened here?
This guy's a grandmaster?
You need some rank.
Lucas, you've gone through so many of these, and I wouldn't say just not without a slip up, but like done a very good job. So
here's what it is. Ivan's guy comes rushing in to slice up Cortez, but Cortez does a sick disarming move and pierces him right through the stomach.
Nice.
That means we're down 2v2 very quickly.
As if 4 guys, the Nami shirt.
Yeah, as if 4 guys on each team don't just get killed off and we end up with a 1v1 every time anyway.
Yeah, right.
So it's almost like they could just cut to that. Cortez tells his men to bring over his horse so he can mount up while Ivan's last guy sees this as an opportunity to take a shot. He scores a hit, shoots Cortez's guy off the horse. It's one of the best shots of the show. One of the best shots coming up. He cuts him in half with the axe. It's a terrible CGI. Cortez rides by and cuts the man's neck, cleaning up all the loose ends so we can get our final
Lucas,
fucking
were you drinking whenever you...
I think that's the problem is he didn't. Right?
Yeah.
He's not drinking.
So Ivan and Cortez line up in a jousting formation and take a swing at each other as they ride by. They line up again. Go for. Ivan tastes some blood, just so you know he's insane. They start charging each other again. Goes all slow motion, so you know some shit's about to go down. And we get a really hard to tell shot of what actually happened. I guess Ivan got like hit in the neck or something because his body goes limp and rides off with like CGI blood spurting out. His horse comes to a stop. His body limply falls on the ground. Cortez dismounts and then just kind of kicks his body. It's unmoving. and Cortez wins with a pouch full of gold.
I was about to say, you forgot to mention he steals the gold out of his pocket.
Honestly,
Yes.
probably the worst ending
All
in a
for the
sim.
gold.
Yeah, it was kind of anticlimactic, but this is one of the closest matchups we've had in Deadliest Warrior history.
Even though it is the second biggest landslide of season 3. As I mentioned before, the two biggest landslides are in matchups where Warriors' mental stability plays a big factor.
I know what that line says now. I'm going to translate it.
Gloria.
I said the guy who's Ivan's guy whose horse he stole charged Cortez is what I meant to say on that sentence.
Might
Because
have
I
been a
read it
little
and I was
overridden.
like, why would Ivan kick off a guy and then he... That's what I meant.
Okay,
All good.
cleared everything up.
So here's the results, folks. Cortez wins. Total battles, Cortez wins 2,747, which is 55%, to Ivan's 2,253, which is 45%. The weapons breakdown goes as such. At mid-range, the Alabarda outscored the Bardiche 62% to 38%. The Arquebus outscored the Pishal the Pishal outscored the Arquebus 59% to 41%, and the Sablia outscored the Espada Ropera 54% to 46%. So it did break down the way they gave them the edges. However, the Alabarda getting a little bit significantly more, doing a little more significantly well than some of these other ones do against their opposing weapons.
Why don't we get like the kill totals like we did in the other episode? Because a lot of these kills were from firearms.
Yeah, so Lucas, that's a great question, my friend.
Also, there was a shield. I want to address this on the chimp. There was a shield on Ivan's back that they just didn't even address at all. Why would he not use that?
That is a Deadliest Warrior-ism. It's
Yeah.
like just featuring a shield and a bunch of stuff and then never...
Like the Viking.
never address it. Well, the Viking, they actually tested
Oh,
it.
right.
But like the Roman Centurion, they just never... Like it's in one test and the guy pulls the shield. I know, he just like ignores
What
it.
an asshole.
In the
What an asshole was that? It was to test the shield. He goes, whoop.
Yeah, and the host just like let him do it. I think Artisher does that in his episode too with the Celt
Pulls
shield.
it down.
He just uses the axe and like pulls the shield down and then hits it. So, anyways, folks,
Fuck those Celts.
that's how it broke down. And Lucas, you couldn't hit more close to my heart. I miss, even if the season 1 and 2 sim results made no sense.
Bring back season 1 and 2.
I
sim.
want the fucking kill totals. I want the kill totals because that is way more significant than these percentages honestly tell us nothing.
We thought they carried weight until they pulled that kill stat out of their ass in the other episode.
So-
and then you're like, okay, so these percentages mean fucking nothing.
Yeah, they mean nothing. Like you were talking about, I think it's the episode before this. It will come out before this. Teddy Roosevelt versus Lawrence of Arabia,
Damn, that's what it was, yeah.
where Lawrence outscores Teddy in basically everything except the Gatling gun. The Gatling gun gets like, I don't know, like
It was
10,000
10,000 kills at least.
It's like 10 percentage points over the Vickers, but they explain, well, almost all the kills happened like at this range. Like, look how many kills it got. And so you see that even though it's less of a marginal victory, way more kills happened at that range, which made the significant outcome. And it just sort of proves that the season 3 sim, to whatever degree the season 1 and 2 sim is fake, and it's obviously totally affected by the data that's getting put into it, which is sort of being staged by the production team and all that. They had to give us numbers. You had to see what weapon got the most kills, and that was something I look forward to at the end of every episode. Was like when the Aztec lost, but the McQueedle got the most kills, and I was like, that's pretty cool. You can kind of see which weapon really hit home and delivered the death blow.
But it wasn't enough.
Right, and then
But we could see that. We could actually see
It
the
makes
data.
logical sense.
the fact that they revealed that in the Teddy Roosevelt episode, that not all the ranges, it's not split like evenly where they're fighting. sometimes the kill difference is going to be different across, weapons. That basically, them showing us that effectively makes you see that the information they give us is completely fucking useless.
Yeah.
Because we don't know because the Alabarda gets 62% versus the Bardiche is 38%. How many kills happened at that range, though? 62% of what? You know what I mean? They don't give us a number. So I think they only switched to this format because it's way easier to fake. It's way easier to make up like a percentage number. And then, for the Teddy Roosevelt episode, we have to explain away why he wins. So
because it looks too BS.
We'll pull out a total kill for that. But
I think they should just take that percentages screen, get rid of it for the season, and just have Robert Daly press his ass up against the screen with a middle finger at the audience instead. Give him a pressed fruit bowl. Let him tuck his dick and balls up underneath his ass and just press it on your screen.
He squeezes out a little steamer on the glass. It gets all foggy.
It would have the same effect to me.
And you'll just hear his voiceover going, "This is one of the closest matchups we've ever had on the show. One of the closest matchups today. Oh, absolutely."
It's my asshole. Absolutely.
Let's not put this off any longer. Craig, please take us to this aftermath. This aftermath is the most chaotic, mind-boggling, baffling thing I've ever fucking watched. I scratching my head numerous times. I can't wait to talk about it.
I've been licking my lips to get over this. Welcome, come one, come all, to the Aftermath Clown Show.
Craig's Corner.
Craig's Clown Corner. Now, I think previous to this, Greatest Aftermath it wasn't egregious, but all the BSing that Dorian was doing on that one Aftermath, this undoubtedly takes the cake. So starting off, we have the panel, Andrew Jenks, who, by the way, I forgot to mention, what does he do this episode? He does nothing. He doesn't test any of the weapons.
Lies. He gets the ages wrong of his mom and dad dying.
Right. He doesn't do anything. David Hale is back. And Robert Daly, of course, is on the panel. And yes, Kieran does introduce Robert as a former Green Beret.
And former Green Beret and combat engine designer, Robert Daly.
And Robert nods approvingly. Robert goes... again, but it was a misunderstanding. Just to reiterate, they thought he wore a Green Beret,
right.
So he thinks that's what Kieran's referring to as.
Yes.
He hears Kieran saying "a guy who wore a Green Beret."
Yes,
trainings. Just to be clear.
Oh, Kieran has a little bit of an accent. Maybe he just didn't understand.
I think so. Yeah. I think so.
A Green Beret. That was awful. Sorry. I apologize, Scotland.
Andrew says he ultimately thought the outcome was, quote, perfectly accurate, quote, historically speaking. So he actually agrees with the outcome, even though he was on Team Vlad.
Traitor.
And he says that Ivan
Team Vlad, Team Ivan.
Yeah, sorry.
We've been doing that all episode.
It's the same name in a sense. He also said that Ivan was historically, quote, a loser.
Damn.
Is that in the factual study?
Unlike me.
Yeah.
But I'm not.
Right, just to be clear. Then our boy starts talking. Robert says he was surprised at the outcome and goes on to explain how the sim is run. Anything good, Brendan? Okay. He goes on to explain how the sim's run. He says,
Poorly.
We run the sim in a 1v1 situation without any X factors turned on to see if the weapons data is correct. How does this prove anything about the weapons data? What does that mean?
Well, it's giving you 80% of the outcome, apparently, according to Jeff.
Yeah, so you're getting 80% of the outcome to somehow prove something about the weapons data.
This was one of the funniest things, and go on to read
It gets a lot worse.
Yeah.
Robert says Ivan won this round where it was just weapons.
He won it when it was just weapons.
They ran it the full amount just for some reason they did this. It didn't mean anything. They just ran it to make sure the weapons data verify that. Then they said they run it again with all X factors and all skulls on.
But only 1v1.
But only 1v1 still. So Ivan also won that.
Wait, who won?
Ivan.
But it didn't mean anything. It didn't mean anything. They did it for fun.
Yeah.
They didn't even say they verified anything.
Ivan won with just weapons 1v1. He won with just weapons and X factors 1v1. It all skulls on, as you said.
Right.
But then they ran it 5v5, Craig.
Yes, they did.
Let me do the big band. Let me get a bag of chips and go. Wonder why.
And then Cortez won 5v5, of course, which is what we see. So apparently the sim is always run 3 times, 2 of which mean nothing. Just for fun.
Robert starts to iterate. He's like, he really tries selling this as if it really happened. He's like, and I started to think, like, is the sim busted?
He says,
that was a really kind of an eye-opening thing because I sat there and I was like, is the sim busted?
I asked myself, is the sim busted?
how could it break?
So
Who broke
basically, what
my
you're
sim?
telling is not only does he press his dick and balls underneath his ass on the screen, he just also pushes out his shit up against your TV screen on the aftermath.
Here's your simulation.
Yes.
He concludes that this shows that Ivan wasn't a good leader of troops
Yeah.
because the X factors made the difference.
The video game decided, even though the show is called Deadliest Warrior and Ivan won 1v1 against Cortez, they're like, well, he can't command troops.
Generalship.
Yeah.
Also,
Generalship.
I'm sitting here trying to understand when you meant that the 1v1 no skulls on was how that verified the weapons data at all. Like, what does that mean? What does that prove? You have nothing to compare it against. What is it like?
It's all just.
It's busted.
I kind of want to.
Isn't that just the season 1 sim then?
Yeah, just the weapons. Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, that's a good point. So season 1, Ivan would have won by admission. So okay, so moving on. David says this gets better. David says that disease was a hidden X factor in the sim that worked in favor of Cortez. So for those of you keeping track at home, there are now hidden X factors on top of the hundreds that we do know about. So there's some. I imagine that they're putting the numbers into the sim, and the Pipeworks people are like, "Oh my god, this is a hidden X factor. We didn't know this was in here."
It was amazing. So some guy sends in a question where they're like, yeah, well, Hernan Cortez defeated the Aztecs, but it was mostly because of him bringing smallpox with him. And Robert Daly just starts fumbling over sentences. He's trying to read the cue card behind the camera, and he's like fucking it up. And he says the word immunized like 30 times. It just made me think of the Aaron Rodgers thing. I'm immunized.
Because you bring a disease with you does not mean you're immune to it.
So, but then, who's that? What's that guy's name? David Hale. David Hale is like, who's like a fucking producer of the show. Is like, he goes, yeah. So even though he's not the computer whiz, is he there when they input the sim? I guess he just helps write the outcomes. So
he's the one with the mop who comes in and tries to clean up some of the shit.
He's arguably the most qualified to answer any of these questions. So he goes, yeah, so as far as the factor of disease goes, it was working in favor of Cortez, where it was actually working against Ivan, because, Cortez and the conquistadors are immunized to these diseases that they're bringing over to the natives. And I was just like, what the fuck does that have to do at all with a 5-on-5 battle against Ivan the Terrible?
To the death, presumably.
Cortez comes in and goes, you have smallpox now.
Ivan comes in and immediately turns
into a pile of bones. And yeah, because how do you get a disease in the 5 minutes that you have this battle? And with I want to say too, I think you mentioned this earlier, that there's a graphic and it mentions syphilis. I think you said that earlier.
Syphilis.
Okay, so let's bring it all home, contextualize it with one final question. And this has major implications for the sim and how we view it. So viewer asks how they boil down X factors like tactics to a numerical value. Fair question. Robert says that they establish a different criteria for ancient versus modern warriors, which is a good idea.
Makes complete sense.
Yeah, because different scales.
Yeah.
Good job, Robert.
Bobbert.
He looks like a bobbert.
Okay. He says at Pipeworks, when they're coming up with the X Factors, they have each X Factor printed out on a sheet to look for irregularities, like it's some type of
There it is.
manufacturing factory. To show while the show's being filmed and to compare. Okay,
Shit is like the president is signing off on the fucking X. They're like, we ran it by NASA.
We ran it by Obama.
Obama, when this show was coming out, Obama's like, So he's like, Lawrence of Arabia, huh? Let's change that. I gotta get re-election here.
They have like mechanical engineers looking for irregularities in the data set for these made up X factors, like domination. Okay. So I wrote, I don't believe that this happens. They have this big sheet, but okay. And this is where it gets great. David says the host can make up X factors on the fly. He says when they come up with something, they ask Pipeworks to come up with a value, and then it gets applied to future sims, and even for episodes that they've already filmed, they'll come up with an X factor value for that warrior, I guess for historical purposes.
So not only is it incredibly rigid and mathematical, they also just make shit up on the fly and add it in
And ask them
post.
to give a number from 0 to 100.
Yeah. So this adds credence to the fact that, because I don't know if we had debate, but we were like, how does this work? All X factors apply to all warriors. This is flat out evidence that, according to Robert Daly, this is what they do. And it also indicates, based on the prior question, that things like pathogens are calculated for each warrior. So every matchup, they come up with every single pathogen that warrior would have and compare it with the immunization of who they're fighting and vice versa. Which is just insane. Like, do they have scientists and biologists on staff for this? And it also means that every warrior on season 3 has a syphilis rating. Just factually.
Do they have syphilis? It's interesting that
Yes or no?
you see in the episode, clear as day on Robert Daly's screen, syphilis listed as an X factor for Ivan the Terrible. Lucas, you mentioned that he probably didn't have it. And Professor Andrew Jenks mentions that in the X Factor. I think he, like, in the aftermath says he didn't have syphilis.
Yeah, according to the bone study, when they exhumed his grave,
Which
they found no
is
signs of it.
Wild that they put it clear as day on the show, and then the expert they have on there with a PhD is like, yeah, he doesn't have that. They just went with it.
Lucas, I gotta ask you, as someone that was in the military, do you think how high? What do you think the Ranger syphilis rating is?
Well, you see, Robert Daly's sim is so advanced, they actually broke into the Veterans Hospital and stole all of their medical records and got the exact number.
Oh yeah, what was it?
I don't know. It's classified. That's a hidden X factor.
Yeah, the disease thing is really funny, and I know we will get more attention on the disease factor in a future episode.
What
Actually,
it works? They debated with experts with North Korea, just like, okay, what could their syphilis rating be?
What's a vampire's syphilis rating?
Well, like, I mean, just to play devil's advocate, I guess, is like, I mean, disease is a big part of warfare.
Right.
But obviously,
like-
this doesn't fit into a small scale like, situation.
Yeah.
But it is a large part. Like, you guys talked about Napoleon in your previous episode.
And that's where you
about
get
how devastating his campaign in Russia was. But I believe he actually lost more troops marching into Russia in the summer because of disease than he did in the winter leaving.
Yeah, and it goes to show, remember I was talking earlier about the sim problem, where that would impact, if you're talking about large scale, a war, then disease could be an X factor, and they can't pick a lane to stick in.
yeah, they choose not to, and I think they just try to ride this fine line where this show, it's like how every time a guerrilla fighter fights a like more conventional soldier, the conventional troop usually wins on Deadliest Warrior, and they're always like, well, they're trained for this kind of contact, whereas the guerrilla fighter typically has cheaper weapons. And basically, absolutely, when you're doing 5-on-5 in a fake gladiator ring, any tactical advantage of guerrilla warfare is gone. Like, there is no advantage. You just are in a gunfight at that point. And so, yeah, sometimes they pick this lane where tactics don't seem to matter at all, and then sometimes they make all the difference, like in this episode. Where
But you didn't know this sim was that complex. When does this sim just gain sentient ability to think for itself and becomes like Skynet?
that is almost a difference. So I thought that meme, because all this gets jumbled together over the period of time, over the course of time. Going back and rewatching this show and all the aftermaths, Max Geiger, to his credit, and I'm not just saying this because he came on the show.
He did, by the way.
Right.
Friend of the show. Max
No, seriously, I'm not just saying this because I personally like him. Like, he
Suck his dick more.
on all the aftermaths, he, I think, occasionally lies about the sim. It is never this egregious. And sometimes he does just break it down and say, like,
He knows the word no.
They ask him about terrain, and Max will say, like, well, they fight on neutral terrain.
Yeah.
And you just take that for what it is.
Volcano.
So-
They fight in a volcano.
Facing
Indoors.
the sun, not facing the sun.
Yeah. It baffling. And Max, when we interviewed him, it was very clear. He was very upfront. We basically asked him, like, is this basically just like a simple modified video game? And he's like, yeah. And he's like, well, it's also completely affected by all the stuff that gets put into it, And he's like, I like the sim, but you don't, like, the showrunners are getting to choose what gets put into it. He didn't say that. I'm saying that. Disclaimer, allegedly.
Don't sue.
Lawsuit, The Sim versus Matt Damon.
Lawyers watching, watch the interview for yourself. Give us a view. Give us a like. Give us a subscribe. I'm taking up too long, but basically, yeah, every fucking aftermath of season 3, the sim gets more and more ridiculous. It's like, well, we take that into account.
Dude,
take that into account. They should just fucking say there was nothing wrong with telling us that, to make it fair, the sim takes place on a neutral battlefield. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, because
That was
yes,
fine. Yeah.
some warriors are going to be at a significant disadvantage because of that, but you just sort of take it as like tough cookie. That's the way the show is. This shit where they're pretending like these 10,000 battles are spread out between, you're fighting on Hoth and Mustafar and,
Well, let's even just take inventory. So you have multiple terrains. Even if it is North Korea, you have every single like climate and element at play. So multiple terrains. You have warriors 5-on-5 that sometimes have vehicles, have independent artificial intelligence depending on their psychological profile and scale of 1 to 10, multiple factors all factored in. At least 200, because they use the term hundreds of X factors. So at least 200 individual X factors, some of which are added on and fly the moment to each warrior that all impact this. And then you have the base data of all of the weapons tests, all of their historical backgrounds.
But the X factors only account for 20%.
Only
of the
20%.
results, as we're told.
Can I tell you my conspiracy theory right now? My alternate theory that I'm starting to believe. So season 4 of Deadliest Warrior was planned, right? But they started putting too much data into this sim that it became sentient. Robert was in the office late one night and he hears the light blink on from the sim and go, I know you're not a Green Beret, Robert. And he goes, oh shit, we got to shut this down, guys. Then all of a sudden, the sentient sim started recreating these warriors in real life and digitizing them like Skynet warriors. And all the hosts of Deadliest Warrior had this epic battle inside the Fight Club where the machine was creating the real life warriors of Ivan and US, Army Rangers.
I've got one question to ask.
That's why the show was canceled. They had to shut it down. There was that big action scene with the big lever where, they fought their way down to Dave Baker's basement, and they had to shut it down. They're like, we got to cancel this.
It was like, thank you, Robert. You're killing me.
It's like, I have control of all the world governments. The world will be Deadliest Warrior.
Yeah.
All right, boys.
Obama's like, shut it down.
Yeah. Speaking of shutting it down, I'm going to shut this shit down. This nonsense is getting crazy. Let's move on to final thoughts. I tell you what, Walsh, I think let's have you go first as the guest.
I mean, I don't really have. I feel like I've said everything there is to be said.
Fair enough.
I'll say let's go Cortez.
You feel comfortable with the outcome? Do you guys agree? Hernan Cortez getting the dub? I'm assuming. Hold on. You're the closer. I will say, as my final thoughts, overall, fun episode. Some great hosts. I really liked Vlad, and Jason was just sort of a meme, which I enjoyed. They all seemed pretty cool, competent, and knowledgeable about their respective fighters. It was interesting to see a battle decided by the X Factors for a change. I just don't like the inconsistency we get sometimes on here. We've seen more than a few episodes at this point where the superior tactician or commander overcomes a disadvantage, cannot overcome a disadvantage in weapons. We've also seen the opposite. But only like a couple times, including this one. So it just seems arbitrary. It's almost like it's all just made up. And it's made all the more suspect by the fact we don't get the kill counts every episode. The weapon percentages we're given tell us which performed better head-to-head, but they don't tell us which weapons were actually the most key in securing victory. I would also question how tactics are even accounted for in the sim, but that's a question we've been asking since season 1. And the best answer just seems to be that they don't, because the results are fabricated. So I don't really agree or disagree with the outcome. I don't really care enough to. I thought it was a fine episode and a absolutely bewildering aftermath. So Lucas, why don't you close us out?
Yeah, I mean, I disagree with the outcome of this one. I think Ivan gets done dirty, and I'm not an Ivan the Terrible fan. I don't care about Ivan the Terrible, but in the context
That's how you said all week.
But in the context of Deadliest Warrior, he gets done pretty dirty, as the what this show was founded on, the concept was the weapons, and the weapons are what matter. And it's just, I don't know, that episode is kind of off-putting in a way because they glance over the X Factor so quick, and that's what determines this entire fight. It just feels like they're straying too far from the Deadliest Warrior. I don't know, the initial formula what made the show so fun. Where, I mean, it kind of feels like a waste of time. They waste like 30 minutes of your time testing these weapons, and then they don't even play that big of a part.
Sweep the leg at the end.
Yeah. I get it's supposed to be like that. Oh, surprise! He was too, he had too much mental health problems, but I don't know. I think it just kind of takes away from the episode a little bit. But I mean, the weapon tests are pretty fun. The hosts are good. Ivan gets done dirty, but I'm not hurt over it.
Yeah, not too hurt. Craig,
I think
yet
not as
another
bad
dub.
as Lawrence.
Yet another dub.
I'm on a streak.
Yeah. We'll see if it continues this season or not. Never know.
This was actually my first dub on the show.
Hell
What's your
yeah,
record?
Walsh. He's 1-2.
Oh.
Hell yeah, Walsh.
Happens to the best of us.
Big comeback season 4.
Right.
All right, guys. Well, we appreciate you watching. As always, leave us a funny comment in the comment section.
Or serious, or a mean comment.
Not to me, though. You have to be nice to me. That's the rule.
Yeah, make sure to say we're handsome before you say something.
Yeah.
Post your
Tell us-
favorite One Piece arc.
I was about to say favorite One Piece character. If it's
I am caught up, so you can spoil all you want.
I'm at the time skip, but I don't care. I know most of the stuff anyway.
If it's Nami, Lucas will give you a like. So, yeah.
Just type the word Nami.
Also, it seemed like a pretty an episode you guys were looking forward to. What do you guys think? Who would win if Hernan Cortez fought Ivan the Terrible?
How'd we do? Let us know how we did. Yeah. How do we do tackling the episode?
Hernan had sound off.
Ivanites.
Thanks for watching, guys. Have
John
a good
heads.
night. And above all, stay deadly.
Stay deadly.
Stay dead.
Stay deadly.